When I was little, my mom met my sister's dad. He told her straight away that I wouldn't matter much to him because I wasn't his kid. Mom was okay with that. They moved in together soon after meeting, and he never really paid attention to me. I was just there when they had my sister Katie. They were married by then, and Katie was always his favorite. Katie and I didn't really get along. Sometimes we were okay, but I'd back off when she started praising her dad and saying how lucky we were to have him. Even after her dad told her I wasn't his kid and she was the only one who mattered to him, she'd still talk about him as if he was amazing to both of us. Our mom always told me I had to accept having a different dad than Katie and be okay with it. She said kids can have different parents and still be close siblings. Katie always got everything, and she often reminded me of that. She'd ask why I didn't have nice clothes, or why I didn't eat with them, or why I didn't join them for outings with Dad. She'd tell me to speak up for myself. Once, she pestered me all day to ask Dad for new clothes, so I did just to get her off my back. But Dad didn't understand why I was asking him for anything, and that was the end of it. Katie said I gave up too easily. When Mom got sick when I was a teenager, I decided to tell Katie everything, hoping she'd understand. But she insisted her dad was still my dad because he raised me, and I should treat him like my dad. She brushed off everything I said, but she was just a kid, so I get it. I moved out just before turning 18, and then Mom died. It wasn't surprising that I wasn't welcome at the funeral. Katie wanted me there, but her dad made it clear it wasn't my place. Honestly, I didn't feel sad about missing the funeral because I had a strained relationship with Mom. 6 years later, Katie's dad got diagnosed with a terminal illness because he hadn't taken care of himself. I'm 24 now, and Katie's 20. She called me when they got the news, saying we needed to help take care of him. I told Katie I wouldn't do it. She said we couldn't abandon him, that we owed him better than leaving him alone. But I disagreed. I felt like I didn't owe him anything. He never cared for me and even criticized me for not being his kid. I wasn't going to comfort him in his final months. Katie said she couldn't handle it alone. I suggested she let others help her, but I wasn't going to care for someone who treated me poorly when I had no say in the matter. She called me selfish, saying she needed my help because I was all she had. Am I wrong? No, you're not wrong. Katie should know better now, even if she was just a kid before. But your mom made the mistake by marrying this man who didn't accept you. Your mom shouldn't have let someone into her life who didn't care for you. He took away your childhood, and you don't owe him anything. You don't owe your mom anything either. Katie seems self-centered and selfish. Your stepfather mistreated you, and your mom let it happen. It's sad that your mom prioritized finding a husband over your well-being. That part of your life is over now, so don't let Katie drag you back. He made it clear he wasn't your dad, and Katie living in her own world doesn't change that truth. Consider cutting her out of your life for good. She comes across as a spoiled favorite child lacking empathy, maybe even finding satisfaction in your suffering. It's best to disengage and move on. I became a mom 18 weeks ago, but I kept my pregnancy mostly secret, only sharing the news with my husband's parents and my sister. The announcement didn't sit well with my dad, his wife, or my half-sister. For those wondering why I kept it from them, there are 2 reasons. A few years ago, I believed I was pregnant but experienced a loss. I had openly shared the positive test, and when the truth came out, my dad's wife became overbearing. She believed I needed her as a mother figure since she married my dad after our mom passed away when my sister and I were young. However, she was too intrusive. Even after everything I went through, she wouldn't respect my need for space, and my husband had to ask her to leave our home. Another reason is that my sister has 2 kids. During both pregnancies, our dad's wife constantly pressured her about needing her as a mother figure. She insisted on being there for my sister during her pregnancy and talked about how it would strengthen their bond and make my sister appreciate her more. My sister ended up resenting her because of this. While neither of us were ever big fans of hers, my sister grew to despise her because she was convinced she would replace our mom by being there for her during pregnancy. She even dismissed my sister's feelings of missing our mom, saying pregnancy made women irrational and there was no reason to miss a ghost. Since then, my sister has refused to let our dad's wife be called grandma by her kids. All of this influenced my decision to keep quiet about my pregnancy when it happened. I don't live near my dad anymore, so I just stayed away. I also knew it would hurt their feelings, but I honestly didn't care. My dad was furious, and his wife and my half-sister sent me messages accusing me of being cruel and unfair, saying I robbed them of the excitement and tainted the whole experience. They both emphasized how important it was for Dad's wife to become a grandma for the third time, especially since her other grandkids would never call her grandma. And they called me selfish for not considering her joy. Am I the one at fault here? Absolutely not. Your stepmother seems overly controlling. You did what was best for yourself, your husband, and your child. Your pregnancy and birth were about your own family, not about meeting their expectations. You can't force relationships to be close. They either naturally develop or they don't. Step-parents who try to replace a deceased parent usually fail to create the bonds they hope for. Did she expect your baby to start calling her grandma as soon as it was born? She's not really your stepmother. She's just your dad's second wife. It seems like they need a reality check to understand that their idealized family fantasy isn't real and won't come true. They're still upset because they're holding onto their fantasy and feel hurt when it's not fulfilled. The only way to get them to respect your boundaries is for them to accept reality as it is. You're doing the right thing by protecting your family and setting boundaries. Congratulations on your new baby. Sending you lots of peaceful baby vibes. My husband's sister moved in with us after a big argument about the baby's name. They're expecting a baby, and she's 7 months along. She's known to be particular about food and refuses to eat what we normally cook. We've been catering to her by preparing her favorite dishes, which unfortunately I can't eat due to allergies. So every evening, I have to figure out what to eat since she only wants food that I'm allergic to. Last night, my husband agreed to cook separate meals for her and us together. However, when I got home after a long day at work, I discovered that my sister-in-law had convinced him to cook only her preferred meal and cancel the one we had planned. They were eating together in the kitchen when I arrived. Apologetically, my husband explained that his sister persuaded him to eat with her and not to cook the meal I wanted for us both. I pretended it was okay and ordered food from a restaurant instead. After showering and doing some work on my laptop, I returned to the kitchen to find my order on the counter, open and mostly eaten. I turned around to see my sister-in-law standing there, admitting she couldn't resist the smell and had helped herself to the food. I lost my temper and yelled at her, demanding to know why she did that. She claimed she saved me some, but there was hardly anything left except rice and dressings. We argued, and I reached my limit. I told her to pack her things and leave first thing in the morning. She started crying, and my husband defended her, insisting that she was pregnant and eating for two. Finally, he suggested I quickly make something for myself from the fridge and let it go. But I refused, leading to a bigger argument. Am I wrong for kicking her out over this? Not at all. You don't just have a sister-in-law problem. Your husband is a big part of the issue. Your sister-in-law does sound selfish and entitled, pregnant or not, but the real issue lies with your husband prioritizing her needs over yours. How did he think it was acceptable to deny you dinner that you were expecting, especially when you couldn't even eat what she wanted? Your sister-in-law is in the wrong, but your husband is the one who needs to reassess his priorities. It's baffling how little they seem to care about you. Seriously, just toss the whole family out. Their treatment of you is unacceptable. I don't understand why your husband would agree to not cook for you. It's nonsensical. How could he be okay with that? Perhaps he could have cooked the same meal for himself and his sister and something else for you. Where do people find spouses like this? And this is the same woman who left her husband over a disagreement about baby names. Clearly, she's unbearable. Who walks out over baby names? Parenthood is stressful. I've been there with 2 kids. But seriously, if one person disagreed with a name, it was a no-go. So in your position, I wouldn't have even let her stay in the first place. I'd tell her to sort it out and go back to her own house to eat her food. Your husband and sister-in-law are being incredibly disrespectful. If I were you, I'd ask your sister-in-law's husband if you could spend a week at his place since his wife is driving you crazy. I bet both your husband and your sister-in-law would quickly resolve all their fights in Brazil. There's a saying that doesn't quite translate into English but fits perfectly here. The cure for crazy is crazier. The only winner in this situation seems to be your brother-in-law, who's getting a break from all this drama. My fiancé and I recently got engaged and chose our wedding party. My bridesmaids are my 2 closest friends, and his groomsmen are my brothers. One of them is his best friend, and the other is someone he's known for just as long. They've been like big brothers to him. My fiancé has a younger sister who's 4 years younger than him. She's a cancer survivor, and her experience has also shaped their relationship. His parents clearly favor her, showering her with excessive attention and expecting everyone else to do the same. She knows how to manipulate people by leveraging the special treatment she receives. My fiancé has admitted that he sometimes can't stand her. Whenever he refuses her requests, she guilt-trips him by bringing up her cancer or accusing him of wishing she had died. Although he's not estranged from his family, he's not particularly close to them either. He holds a lot of resentment towards his parents, blaming them for favoring his sister and neglecting him during his childhood. He felt overshadowed by her illness and then was expected to treat her like royalty. When we discussed our wedding party, my fiancé expressed his desire not to include his sister. I respected his decision, especially since, to be frank, I have no personal connection to her whatsoever. We've never spent time together or formed any sort of bond. Apparently, she and my fiancé's parents were expecting her to be asked to be a bridesmaid once they heard about our engagement. However, I hadn't planned on inviting her. I had already chosen my 2 closest friends to be bridesmaids. When his parents and sister confronted me about it, I explained that I hadn't intended to include her in the bridal party. They argued that she's family and important to my fiancé. I explained that while she may be important to him, she isn't close to me, and asking me to include her in my bridal party felt inappropriate. They called me foolish and insisted that I should try harder. They even suggested that she deserved a place in the bridal party more than anyone else, and that thinking otherwise made me seem like a bully, especially considering all she's been through. Am I wrong here? You're not wrong, but your fiancé should also step up and express that he doesn't want her in the bridal party. It's a joint decision, and both of you have the right to choose who stands beside you on your big day. It's unfair that you're shouldering all the blame for this when it's a decision you both made together. The parents are crossing boundaries here, and your fiancé should support you in setting limits with them. Consider reducing or cutting contact with them if their behavior persists. It's concerning how they tried to manipulate situations to favor his sister. If you and your fiancé have a child, they might even suggest giving her the baby because she's a cancer survivor. It's crucial to limit their involvement in wedding planning to prevent any unwanted surprises, like her showing up in the same colors as your bridesmaids or wearing a white dress to steal attention. Let your fiancé handle his family. He needs to address this with them. I, a 27-year-old woman, lived with my parents until last week. I have a dog whom I adore. She's been my best companion since I graduated from university. I'm not very social and prefer her company over most people I know. While I've had boyfriends and even a short-lived relationship that ended amicably, I'm just not interested in much beyond my work and my dog. My parents view this as a shortcoming, but I don't. My brother also resides with us. He's in high school and doesn't contribute financially. I cover about 50% of the household expenses, including groceries. I occupy the basement suite, which, while not legally rentable, suits a family member's needs according to building codes. Converting it for renting would be costly and impractical. My mom concluded that the reason I'm not actively seeking a husband is because my dog demands too much of my attention. While my pup does have some health issues, they are manageable and don't affect her quality of life significantly. Despite this, my mom gave her away while I was at work. When I returned home, my dog was gone, along with all her belongings, her toys, leash, everything. I confronted my mom, insisting she tell me where my dog was, threatening to involve the authorities and accuse them of theft if she didn't comply. I retrieved my dog from where she was being held and then returned to my parents' house to gather my belongings. Afterward, I went to stay with a friend. My dad has been reaching out, asking for money to cover expenses for the month. I reminded him that he should have considered this before allowing someone to take my dog. Unfortunately, my dad lost his job due to the current global situation, and they're struggling to cover all the household expenses without my contribution. He mentioned that they'll run out of money in 3 months without my assistance. However, I no longer trust them. My family believes I'm foolish for prioritizing my dog over them. Am I wrong? You're not wrong at all. Your parents were clearly taking advantage of you. You were paying half of everything, including what should have been market rent for a basement suite that wasn't even up to code. That's unacceptable on so many levels. And that's before they decided to get rid of your dog. They deserve to face the consequences of their actions. Whatever you decide, never give them another penny. I'm relieved that you were able to retrieve your dog and find a safe place for both of you to stay. Perhaps they can consider moving into the basement and renting out the upstairs room. Problem solved, OP. Living with people who steal from you and try to control you is unsustainable. They're solely responsible for the current situation. Everyone should pull their weight and work, while you find a place far from them where you and your dog can enjoy life. Additionally, if the mother's concern is that you're not seeking a husband, does she expect you to get married and have everyone live together in your home while you continue to support them financially? Or would she expect you to move out and still contribute as if you were living there? The same issue would arise. Your parents' actions have led to this situation, and at almost 30, it's unacceptable for them to still rely on you financially. They should have considered this before betraying your trust and alienating you. It's not just about the dog, it's about rebuilding trust.
Oh. What is this? A divorce notice? And this is a marriage registration form. While cleaning the car, I discovered something puzzling. Inside the envelope were divorce and marriage forms. The old lady is so sloppy, I can't see her as a woman anymore. Oh, that's terrible. I was doubtful that my husband was cheating, but to gather evidence, I installed a surveillance camera which captured Kevin's betrayal in full. Later, pretending to be on a business trip, Kevin went on a trip with his lover. And I decided to bring him down to hell. After seeing Kevin off, I started preparing for my revenge. I contacted someone and invited them over to discuss Kevin's betrayal. That person promised to give Kevin a harsh punishment. Hearing those words, I felt a fire in my chest. I had been fighting alone ever since Kevin betrayed me, but I still had allies. Thinking about it made me feel stronger. My name is Emma Smith. I'm just an ordinary office worker, but my husband, Kevin, works for a well-known large corporation. His father is the company president, and the expectations for Kevin from those around him are high. And he is smoothly climbing the career ladder. Kevin himself is confident that he will eventually succeed in the company. And since being given an executive position, he has been even more devoted to his work. I met Kevin when I happened to come across his parents in distress. I helped his mother, who had collapsed on the roadside due to a medical episode. And they were grateful, considering me a lifesaver. They introduced me to their son, and we eventually got married. Kevin, coming from a wealthy family, was prideful and arrogant, but initially, I didn't mind it much, considering it manly. Our marriage, initiated by his father's introduction, seemed to be going well. However, after some time, Kevin's attitude changed drastically. The feeling of being glad to be married to him lasted only a few years. As the years went by, Kevin started getting important assignments at work. And he began coming home later. With that, our conversations dwindled. And the chances of going out together on his days off decreased because he was too tired. I wanted children, but he dismissed the idea, saying it was too bothersome. Things were good when we were newlyweds. Kevin has changed a lot. As our relationship grew colder, I felt increasingly sad. Despite the cold marital relationship, I had a good relationship with my in-laws. Despite being a business owner, the father-in-law was not at all overbearing. And the mother-in-law, although frail, was gentle and kind. Kevin, being their only child, was probably spoiled by them. Kevin brags about his abilities at work, but he is hopeless in other aspects. He can't even think of doing household chores when he comes home. He just throws his clothes everywhere and immediately sprawls on the couch. At first, I thought I needed to support him, but as years passed, it only became a source of sighs. Yet, he often harshly criticized me. "Hey, food. I'm hungry, hurry up." Upon returning home, Kevin, seemingly in a bad mood, shouted at me. "I just got back from work myself. Wait a bit longer." Kevin, seriously? You really are a nag. Don't face me, it's irritating. What's that supposed to mean? You were home before me. You could have at least thought about preparing dinner. Although I said this, I knew Kevin was incapable of preparing a meal. He had never stood in the kitchen from the time we were dating until now. Shut up, I earn more than you do. Don't compare yourself working at a small company to me. Indeed, Kevin earned more. But that shouldn't mean he could lack compassion. Yet, Kevin used his income as a shield, never bending his will. Seriously. If I knew you were such a cheeky woman, I wouldn't have married you. Make sure you serve me well, so I don't dump you. Kevin smirked and hurled insults as he watched for my reaction. Ignoring his words, I headed to the kitchen. There were hardly any insults when we were newlyweds. How did Kevin change so much? I started preparing dinner silently, but the words he had just said stuck in my mind like thorns, making me feel uncomfortable. Over time, Kevin began to openly show hostility towards me. I wanted to correct my flaws if I had any. But Kevin's comments were always unreasonable, leaving no room for improvement. I didn't know the reason, but I was troubled by my husband's changed attitude. One day, when I tried to go to work, I noticed that my car wouldn't start, perhaps the battery was dead. I immediately called the mechanic to have it checked. But it seemed the repairs would take some time. Hey, can I borrow your car until mine is fixed? I can't get to work otherwise. Huh? Why should I? Kevin uses the train for his commute, so he only drives his car on weekends. Initially reluctant, he eventually agreed to lend me his car. So I started using it for my commutes until my own car was repaired. It's quite a mess in here, really sloppy. Kevin's car was, as expected, a mess. Seeing the chaos inside, I couldn't help but sigh. Being fairly tidy myself, I was reluctant to drive it in that condition, so I started cleaning it up. I briskly put half-finished water bottles and crumpled pieces of paper into a trash bag. The trash bin was overflowing, and the ashtray was stuffed with numerous cigarette butts. Oh, what's this? While cleaning under the passenger seat, I found something shiny. It was one half of a pair of women's earrings, and it definitely wasn't mine. I wondered who could have left it, perhaps a friend or a colleague of Kevin's. I decided to put the earring in my pocket to give to Kevin later. Well, I guess that's about it. Having finished picking up a 12-gallons bag full of trash, I stretched my back. I wonder if he's not embarrassed by such messiness. But it seems Kevin's behavior is hard to change. Right, I haven't checked there yet. I then opened the dashboard that I hadn't checked yet. There had been a time when I left important documents there before. I thought it best to check now, in case something outrageous would appear again. Inside, something caught my eye. There was an A4-sized brown envelope left behind. Perhaps it was work-related documents. It was a good thing I checked. Thinking it might be something important, I picked up the envelope and looked inside. However, what I found was unexpected. Oh. What is this? A divorce notice? And this, a marriage registration form. Thinking this could be some kind of evidence, I decided to take a photo with my smartphone before putting it back. The earring I found earlier might belong to Kevin's mistress. Such a worry crossed my mind. Kevin's affairs with women continued to haunt him. Late one night when he came home, his clothes smelled of perfume, and once there was lipstick on his collar. However, the evidence I currently had was too weak to confront Kevin about his infidelity. Unable to follow Kevin around all the time due to work, I resolved to hire a detective agency. When I finally received the report from the detective agency, I was shocked. Just as I feared, Kevin was indeed having an affair. The other woman was a receptionist at his company named Tracy. The report detailed how they met several times a week. Kevin told me he was working late, but in reality, he left work at 6 p.m. and went straight to Tracy's apartment. It seems their relationship had been going on for quite some time. Kevin had been noticeably colder towards me for a few years. Surely, their relationship had started around that time. Then another shocking truth came to light. Kevin had been bringing Tracy home when I was not around. I immediately decided to install surveillance cameras at home and capture everything. I made up a reason to leave the house, and Kevin foolishly fell for it. Later, when I checked the surveillance camera footage, I saw the disgraceful figures of the two. The location was our bedroom. Shamelessly, Kevin had let Tracy into our bedroom and they had acted there. Hey, are you sure your wife won't come back? I really hate it if we run into each other. She said she's out today, so no one will be at home, totally safe. We won't get caught. The camera not only captured their actions but also recorded their conversation clearly. They seemed drunk on the thrill of their affair, laughing boisterously. Their foolishness was astounding. It's so thrilling. Bringing your mistress into the house while your wife is away, and this is the bedroom, right? The thrill makes it more exciting. Kevin, you're really a bad man. Tracy smirked maliciously, pleased to know she had an edge over his wife. For Tracy, I'd divorce that old lady anytime. I've been fed up since we got married. Tracy is definitely better. Kevin's words were indeed a shock. Although our marital relationship had grown cold over the years, we initially trusted each other. Maybe there was something wrong with me. I was about to think so, but Kevin's next words made me rethink. Tracy is many times better. The old lady is sloppy, her skin lacks firmness. I can't see her as a woman anymore. Oh, that's terrible. I would cry if someone said that to me. The two laughed mockingly at my appearance. I was dumbfounded by their vulgar remarks. Aging is a natural process. Kevin is plenty old enough to be considered a middle-aged man by society's standards. Anger began to bubble within me at his unbelievable betrayal. I could not let this go unnoticed. I will never forgive him. I'll make sure he sees hell. Several days had passed since I checked the surveillance footage. See ya. I don't know when I'll be back. With his usual indifferent attitude, Kevin left the house. He said he was going on a business trip for 3 nights. But I knew it was a lie, he was actually going on a trip with Tracy. Even though they had been meeting secretly, they were quite active. While inwardly mocking him, I smiled and saw him off. Have fun. When you come back, you'll see hell. The house was silent after Kevin left. I began preparing for my revenge. Hey. You. What the hell is this? 4 days later, my phone rang, and an infuriated Kevin yelled at me on the call. What's got you so angry? It's your doing, isn't it? Where did you take my car? And why is there nothing left at home? Kevin was panicking as he interrogated me. It was funny to see him, who always looked down on others, in such a frenzy. I got rid of everything. That car, being a luxury vehicle, sold for a good price. Oh, and I put that apartment up for sale, so you better move out quickly. The apartment and the car aren't in your name. You can't just do whatever you want with them. Kevin was infuriated, seemingly unable to comprehend my actions. Well, maybe I'll tell you later. But how was your trip? Did you enjoy it? It's good that you got to indulge one last time before you face a tough life ahead. Huh? I don't understand. Do you realize what will happen to you for doing this to me? How long are you planning to delude yourself into thinking you're in a superior position? I don't mind being apart from you at all. I once trusted Kevin and loved him. But that's all in the past now, and all that remains is the hatred for his betrayal. Don't get cocky, a woman like you will only live in loneliness if you leave me. Oh, you're quite confident about yourself, aren't you? But I wonder about that. I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief at Kevin. Who would never admit he was wrong, even if it was his fault? He's the type to act tough towards those he considers beneath him. Unfortunately, you and I are strangers now. We are already divorced. What? Kevin exclaimed in a ridiculous voice. He must have been shocked by the unexpected response. But it was no bluff or lie. A few days ago, Kevin and I were no longer husband and wife. I submitted the divorce papers I found in your car. It was good that they were already processed, so I could submit them right away. That was just a joke. Why would you submit it without permission? Well, now you can marry your beloved Tracy, right? That's great for you. Of course, I've also submitted the marriage registration for the two of you. Both forms had already been submitted. This meant that the divorce with Kevin was finalized, and his marriage to Tracy was complete. What? I don't understand what you're talking about. Kevin played dumb when Tracy's name came up. He must still think his affair hasn't been discovered. You don't need to hide it anymore. I hired a detective and saw all the cozy moments between you two. Kevin must have never dreamed he was being followed by a detective, as he was speechless from shock. Let's meet and talk once. We get too emotional over the phone. Huh? That's impossible. I'm not in the US anymore. What? That's such an obvious lie. It won't work. Oh, it's true. Since you treated me like a nuisance, I decided to disappear from your life. You should be grateful. Finding those forms was indeed a shock, but now I see it as a stroke of luck. If I had only found out about the affair without those forms, I would have had to engage in lengthy discussions with Kevin to get a divorce. Kevin claimed that those forms were kind of a joke. He probably never intended to submit them. Maybe Tracy pressured him to prepare them, but it worked out in my favor. You're just saying nonsense to get my attention, right? You can't really be overseas, that's a lie, right? Kevin, who initially came off strong, was significantly subdued. From his reaction, it seemed he never really intended to marry Tracy. But that didn't make me feel any more forgiving. I'm telling you it's not a lie. Let me show you some evidence. I snapped a photo with my smartphone camera and immediately sent it to Kevin. So? Do you still not believe me? The photo showed a foreign streetscape with clearly non-American people walking around. It's certainly not a trip. As proof, there's not a single piece of my luggage left in that apartment. I have no intention of returning to the US where you are. I don't even want to see your face. Although I had lived as a typical housewife, I had majored in foreign languages in college. Since childhood, I had a strong desire to live abroad, and ironically, the divorce from Kevin became the opportunity to fulfill that dream. Of course, I couldn't have moved overseas by myself. But I had powerful allies. I've always dreamed of moving abroad. Thanks to you, I got a good opportunity. Thank you. Where did you get the money? Your parents supported my dream and helped me financially. I can't thank them enough. Kevin was baffled. He couldn't believe that his parents would assist his wife in escaping. My parents. Why would they? As compensation for the trouble you caused. Did you think your affair was only known to me? Your parents know everything too. Go ahead and ask them.
Bye.
Oh, hey, Emma. Wait. We're not talking about it yet. Ignoring Kevin's panicked calls to wait and talk more, I hung up the phone. Confronting Kevin alone about the affair would have probably led him to deny everything. To create a situation where he couldn't escape, I decided to rally support. On the day Kevin pretended to be on a business trip, I invited my in-laws over. "I'm sorry for calling you over so suddenly. I really needed to discuss something important." Seeing my urgent expression, my in-laws sensed something and nodded solemnly. Talking about a suspicion of infidelity is usually difficult to discuss with a spouse's parents. But having known the character of my in-laws over the years, I believed they would trust my side of the story. I showed them all the evidence of Kevin's infidelity I had collected. Initially, they couldn't believe it, but their faces turned pale as they looked through the evidence. "I'm sorry, I can't believe Kevin would do such foolish things. It's my fault for spoiling him too much." The father-in-law's expression was stunned, and the mother-in-law covered her face and wept. They repeatedly apologized to me. It turns out that my in-laws had struggled with infertility for a long time, resorting to fertility treatments. Kevin was their long-awaited child, whom they doted on excessively. Thanks to his father, a business owner, Kevin could have almost anything he desired, which seems to have nurtured his high pride and arrogance. As a child, he constantly quarreled with his classmates, but as he grew older, he appeared to have learned how to interact with people, at least on the surface. After graduating from university, he joined his father's company and quickly established his own position by delivering results. Initially, probably because of his parents-in-law, Kevin must have been pretending to be someone he was not. However, once he realized I would not fight back, his true nature began to show. Now, he treats me harshly as if venting his stress, and has even gone so far as to have affairs as he pleases. This is not behavior befitting someone nearly 50. I am utterly fed up with him. Perhaps I spoiled him too much. I'm sorry, Emma, for making you suffer all this. My parents-in-law apologized to me, looking very disheartened. Moreover, Emma, I have kept this hidden from you, but in addition to his affairs, Kevin might also be involved in a crime. A crime? What do you mean? While making a face as if he had swallowed a bitter bug, the father-in-law disclosed Kevin's sins. I promised to let him face severe punishment. So, please rest assured. Father. Thank you. I nodded at the father-in-law's words. I was filled with gratitude towards the two of them for standing by me instead of shielding their son. This foolish son. He's really done it now. Abandoned by me, with no home or car, Kevin showed up at the company in a daze, only to be summoned straight to the president's office. There, an infuriated father-in-law was waiting for him. What's going on? Why are you so angry? Look at this. He laid out a series of items in front of Kevin. They were the photos of his infidelity that I had handed over. I've heard all about your misconduct from Emma. It's utterly shameful. Doesn't a grown man like you feel embarrassed? Dad, it's not like that. Listen to me. Kevin started making excuses, sensing this was bad. You might not know this, Dad, but Emma is really terrible. She always mocks me and nags. So, I had no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. You are truly the worst, as a person. Do you think such excuses will work? The father-in-law completely dismissed Kevin's excuses, knowing they were blatant lies. Why? Who are you going to believe, your son or Emma, a stranger? Of course, I choose Emma. Why don't you trust me? Reflect on your own actions. Huh? What are you talking about? The father-in-law questioned Kevin in a probing tone. Kevin, his face pale and sweating profusely, seemed to realize something. Listen, Kevin. You knew I was a lenient father and you've been quite reckless. I know everything. I don't know anything. I didn't. Kevin continued to feign ignorance. Are you still trying to deny everything? Losing patience, the father-in-law angrily confronted Kevin with a document. It was an internal audit report that had been secretly conducted about Kevin. It documented the facts of his embezzlement. Did you think embezzling small amounts would go unnoticed? We've been suspicious of someone inside the company and had it investigated. But I never imagined it was you. I was going to return it later. Do you think that kind of excuse will work? What did you use that money for? The internal audit revealed that small amounts of money had been regularly pocketed by Kevin. Realizing he could no longer evade, Kevin started deleting everything. Tracy was always dressed in luxury items, all apparently funded by Kevin. Kevin also paid for Tracy's apartment rent. Although Kevin's income was not meager, sustaining such a lifestyle for years meant his disposable income was limited. Therefore, Kevin had been embezzling amounts that he thought would not be detected immediately. But the company was not foolish. No matter how small, any discrepancy in funds would inevitably lead to an investigation. And the internal audit team uncovered Kevin as the culprit, bringing the matter to his father, the president. Betraying Emma and even squandering company money on your mistress. What were you thinking? It's not like that. I was going to return the money. Enough with your excuses. You're fired. Don't bother coming to work tomorrow. The father-in-law sternly rebuked Kevin and gestured towards the door, telling him to leave. Dad, calm down. You wouldn't really fire your own son, would you? No, I no longer consider you my son. I intend to cut off our familial ties. Wait. The affair was just for fun. I'll return the money. Please forgive me. I won't listen to your excuses. Be grateful I'm not handing you over to the police. Now get out. Driven out of the president's office, Kevin walked away in a daze, never imagining that he, an elite, would be disowned by his own father. Perhaps he thought that even if his affair was discovered, a simple apology would suffice for forgiveness. But Kevin underestimated us. Neither I nor my in-laws will ever forgive Kevin for betraying our family's trust. That was his punishment. Mom, you're on my side, right? Dad is disowning me. Thus, Kevin visited his parents' home and pleaded with his mother. He probably thought that his mother would be more likely to side with him. However, his expectation was about to be betrayed. Of course. Think about what you have done. You are certainly not allowed to come back to this house. To the begging Kevin, the mother-in-law coldly stated her stance. Surprised by her attitude, Kevin responded in anger. Why not? This is my home. I have nowhere to go since you sold the house. I'll be homeless. It seems Kevin is currently living in a hotel, but such a lifestyle will soon deplete his savings. That's probably why he thought of relying on his parents' home, but that wasn't going to happen. It was us who advised you to sell the car and that apartment. The luxury car Kevin had been driving. And the apartment he lived in was actually in his father-in-law's name. They were gifts bought when we got married. Of course, I couldn't just sell them, but the enraged father-in-law declared he would sell them. Emma is a lifesaver to me. Yet, you betrayed her. And I've heard about the embezzlement too. You've really done something foolish. I'll change my ways. The affairs weren't my fault. Tracy seduced me. I only spent the money because she wanted high-end items. Kevin continued to make excuses, to which the mother-in-law sighed heavily. It seems I really went wrong raising you. Your excuses are enough. Don't ever come over our threshold again. Please, Mom, don't abandon your own son. Don't be so heartless. Who's being heartless? I don't want to see your disgraceful face anymore. Just go away. The usually gentle mother-in-law scolded Kevin with a stern face. It appeared she was also angered by her son's actions. But, Mom. Please. No matter how much Kevin pleaded, the mother-in-law never agreed. He probably never thought his mother would abandon him. Realizing he had no allies left, Kevin dejectedly left his parents' home. Afterward, he persistently contacted me, begging for reconciliation. Please. Think it over. What's there to think over? You're already remarried to Tracy, aren't you? I've already divorced her. I need you. Oh, what a pity. Especially after I went through the trouble of filing those papers for you. After divorcing me and being fired. Penniless Kevin was quickly served with divorce papers by Tracy. You can't have forgotten about me, right? It's not too late. Give me another chance. His pleas for forgiveness were absurd, but I had no intention of reconciling with Kevin. If I was so important to you, you should have changed your ways sooner. It's too late for anything now. So what am I supposed to do now? Because of you, I've lost my job, my money, everything. Kevin showed a fit of anger, blaming me for his plight. But it was all his own doing. After all, it seems that even if he shows a wilting attitude, the fundamental personality will not change. It seems that he tried to come out and convince me. But I'm not the kind of person who can be deceived by Kevin anymore. Don't shift the blame. You'd better live with regrets. If you don't ask for too much, you can find a day job somewhere, right? Goodbye. Fed up with Kevin's complaints, I decisively blocked his calls. Living abroad, there was no way for him to reach me, and he had to give up. Later, through a lawyer recommended by the father-in-law, I filed for damages against both Kevin and Tracy. Kevin reluctantly accepted the terms, but Tracy showed an attitude of refusal. Why should I pay any damages? I don't have that kind of money. If you won't pay, I'll have to speak with your parents. They seem quite strict. Wait. Don't tell my parents. I had investigated beforehand and learned that Tracy's rural home was a very strict household. Despite strong opposition from her parents, she had managed to convince them to let her work in the city after graduating from college. If they learned of this matter, Tracy would likely be called back home. Then you'll pay the damages. You got me fired from the company. Life is already tough enough, I can't pay that. Not only had Kevin been fired, but Tracy too had been let go by the father-in-law. With her extravagant spending habits, paying a large amount in damages would be difficult. It's troublesome when you whine. After all, you were the one who picked a fight. It turned out that the earring found in Kevin's car and the documents in the envelope were part of Tracy's scheme to make me divorce Kevin sooner. Marrying Kevin, a corporate heir, would certainly have been hitting the jackpot. But now, with Kevin penniless, Tracy couldn't expect him to shoulder her damages. She had no choice but to pay herself. Fine. I'll figure something out. She clearly did not want to return to the countryside. Finally resigned, Tracy promised to pay the damages. Kevin had tried to raise money by selling the branded items he had given her. But it was far from enough to cover the full amount of damages. Tracy reluctantly started working at night, cutting back on sleep to make ends meet. She was mentally breaking down from juggling jobs, and even started visiting the hospital. Tracy, who had once laughed heartily when Kevin mocked me as an old lady, now looked older than her age due to stress. Disowned by his family, Kevin began visiting job centers to find work at other companies. However, when interviewers asked why he was dismissed for misconduct, His evasive answers made a bad impression, and he struggled to secure employment. He couldn't very well admit to embezzlement, and his job search continued to be difficult. Kevin, out of necessity, has started working day labor jobs that are unfamiliar to him in order to earn money for daily expenses. However, having never done physical labor before, Kevin is utterly useless and is always being scolded by his seniors. Despite how tough it is, he must work. He has no other way to support himself. Once upon a time, if he faced troubles, his parents or I would have resolved them. But now he must manage on his own. Having moved into a small, run-down apartment, Kevin is struggling with household chores and cooking that he never attempted before. This is a good lesson for someone who grew up pampered. Emma, I am truly sorry. Please forgive us. After everything was settled, the father-in-law apologized again for Kevin's affair. He went out of his way to contact me, even though I was overseas. Despite his social status, the father-in-law apologized deeply to me. Next to him, the mother-in-law also bowed, tearfully expressing her gratitude. Please, it's not your fault. Don't apologize. Over the computer screen, I hurriedly urged them to stop. It didn't feel right to have the in-laws apologize when Kevin was to blame. It might sound presumptuous, but even though you and Kevin are divorced, if you would forgive us, could we possibly continue our relationship with you? Now that you and Kevin are no longer connected, my wife and I still think of you like our own daughter. The father-in-law looked up and said this earnestly. There might have been faults on my part as well. Yet, they didn't blame me. Instead, they expressed a desire to maintain our relationship. Tears of joy streamed down my face. Oh, I would be honored to keep in touch. Despite what has happened, I don't want to lose my connection with you too. Hearing my words, both the father-in-law and mother-in-law smiled warmly. They had always treated me exceptionally well, even before the marriage. It would be too sad to end everything just because of the divorce. Therefore, their offer brought me immense joy. The good relationship with my former in-laws has continued even after the divorce. It's really a nice place here, glad we came. It's wonderful to see your face, Emma. Have you been keeping well? Months later, to my surprise, my in-laws came to visit me in the country where I now live. We sat at a cafe near my home, chatting and drinking tea peacefully. They both looked quite well, and they visited me while traveling. Since then, I have settled abroad and now work as an English language teacher. I cannot thank my in-laws enough for supporting my dream over the years. Although the pain of being betrayed by Kevin has not fully healed, I can't dwell on it forever. I've resolved to live brightly in the foreign city I've always dreamed of. Vanessa. I want a divorce. I see. No matter the reason, I can't live with someone who has been unfaithful. Let's get divorced right away. I printed out the divorce papers on the computer and presented them to David. Sign it now. I will sign it after, and we can submit it immediately. I'm sorry for hurting you. Thank you for understanding. We will be happy. As David and Alex were about to leave, Alex approached me and whispered in my ear. It's going to be a luxurious life for me from now on. Sorry for stealing David from you. After saying that, Alex showed a triumphant expression and left arm in arm with David. After all the divorce filing process was done, Alex stretched and spoke to me. Finally, it's over. Well, I guess this was necessary for me to be happy with David. Vanessa, good luck living a frugal life. With a triumphant look, Alex laughed condescendingly at me. I didn't respond. David looked puzzled, but then joined the conversation. Why does it turn into a conversation about Vanessa becoming poor for divorcing me? Huh? Because you're a high earner, David. Since Vanessa is a housewife, she'll lose her income, right? Hearing Alex's words, David burst out laughing. What are you talking about? We are the ones who will be living the poor life. My name is Vanessa. I'm a working housewife. My job is very busy, and I spend a lot of time away from home. David, my husband, supports me by taking care of all the household chores. He's essentially a full-time house husband. We've only been married for 3 months. Despite my absence from home, David never complains and always takes care of me when I'm tired from work. I truly appreciate him. We had a harmonious marriage. But I never thought that the arrival of a certain person would change everything. One day, when I got home, David spoke to me. Can I invite an old friend of mine over sometime? That's fine, but it's unusual for you to invite someone over. I met up with him after a long time recently. We had a great time and agreed to meet again. I want to introduce him to you. David smiled as he explained the situation, and I couldn't help but smile too. That's great, thank you. I should be able to take the next weekend off. So please ask him about his schedule? Okay, thanks, Vanessa. With a happy face, David immediately started sending a message on his phone. I've hardly ever seen David angry or in a bad mood. I love his kind and honest nature and carefree smile. David's old friend is named Alex. He's free next weekend, so he's coming over. David holds him in high regard. He must be a wonderful person. I was also looking forward to meeting Alex. The next weekend, Alex visited our home. David was busy cooking various dishes since the morning to entertain his childhood friend. His skills in house chores are quite impressive, especially his cooking. The delicious-looking dishes were lined up on the table. Alex would surely be pleased. Alex is nearby. I'll go pick him up. With that, David left the house to welcome Alex. Our home is in a high-rise apartment with a concierge always stationed at the entrance. First-time visitors often get confused, so we make it a point to go out and welcome our guests. I wondered what he would be like. As I waited eagerly for her arrival, I heard the door opening. Come in, please.
Hello.
Hearing the conversation, I was puzzled. The voice sounded high for a man. When Alex entered the living room, I was surprised. Wow, what a room! It's so luxurious. There stood a woman, looking around the room curiously. David. This person. Let me introduce you. This is my childhood friend, Alex. Alex, this is my wife, Vanessa. Hello, nice to meet you, Alex here. Hello, nice to meet you. I hurriedly returned the greeting. Assuming from David's childhood friend and the androgynous name Alex, I thought a man was coming. David could have mentioned she was a woman. While slightly uneasy, David and I entertained Alex. As we moved to the dining table for dinner, Alex naturally sat next to David. Normally, wouldn't David and I sit next to each other? I thought, but David seemed unconcerned. It wasn't a formal occasion. And so I didn't make any particular comment as Alex deliberately moved her chair closer to David as she sits next to him. This house is really amazing. The furniture is luxurious too, it's really nice. Right? We can live like this thanks to Vanessa. Really? A couple supporting each other, huh? Alex gazed up at David, looking into his face without ever glancing at me. I just watched the two of them talk. Watching Alex touch David occasionally while they talked cheerfully, I felt uncomfortable. David seemed to not mind. But it was easy to imagine that Alex did not think of David as just an old friend. remaining silent to avoid ruining the mood. David suddenly turned to me and said, "She's fun, right?" He truly believed that, not as a taunt. So, I responded with a forced smile.
Yeah.
Surely, David did not realize how I felt. He must think I'm genuinely enjoying myself. Then, Alex, who had never spoken to me directly before, turned to me and said, "I'm really having fun. Can I come over again?" Her smile did not reach her eyes. Seeing my vague response, David beamed and said, "I'm glad you two are getting along." After that, Alex started visiting our house several times a week. At first, she came on weekends when I was home. But gradually her visits became more frequent, even during my working hours. Today, as I returned home, I heard chuckles coming from the living room. I sighed and entered the living room. There, David and Alex were sitting together on the sofa, laughing joyfully. Alex was intertwined with David's arm. Even when she noticed my return, she made no move to let go. Already tired, this sight only drained me further. David greeted me with a smile, "Welcome back, Vanessa." Without addressing me, Alex simply said, "I'll be leaving then," and left the house. Alex was here again? Hasn't she been coming over too much lately? I had to ask as it was draining me. While preparing dinner, David replied,
Yeah.
"She has. But Alex recently got divorced and moved back in with her parents. I think she's feeling lonely because everyone around her is busy with work or their own families. I feel sorry for her. But I honestly don't feel good about you two meeting when I'm not around. She is too close to you, which makes me feel uneasy. I wish you would limit it a bit." I believe David has no ill intentions. He genuinely wants to help a friend in need. However, I couldn't help but dislike how Alex would touch David casually in front of me and make herself at home during the day. David listened to my concerns, apologized, and agreed to reduce the frequency of their meetings. All I could do was trust David's word. However, Alex still kept coming to our house. Although she targeted times when I was at work, and I never saw her face to face, I knew of her visits. She deliberately left her stuff behind for me to notice. It was obviously a provocation. Despite fewer visits, she was still coming weekly, so I voiced my concerns to David again. David confessed, "I did tell her clearly. But every time, she says, 'Okay,' and then starts crying at the entrance, saying how hard and sad she feels, and I can't bring myself to send her away." I couldn't blame David further and just asked him to keep urging her to reduce her visits. He apologized each time, but the situation did not improve. A month passed since Alex's first visit. She continued to visit our house, and I was mentally exhausted. I wanted to stop her visits somehow. With that determination, I headed to a place I normally wouldn't go alone, David's parents' home. Perhaps there might be some interaction between the families since they were childhood friends. I thought I might find a solution there. I reluctantly rang the doorbell at my in-laws' home. I usually avoid this place for a reason. "Oh, Vanessa. Are you alone? It's been a while, Mother." My mother-in-law, seeing me alone, opened the door with an evident look of displeasure. "She is the reason I am disliked. What brings you here all of a sudden?" "I haven't been able to visit for a while, so I thought I'd stop by to say hello. I'm not pleased to see you. If David were with you, maybe I could tolerate it, but your visit alone is a waste of my time. It's almost refreshing to be spoken to so harshly face to face." Responding poorly would only add fuel to the fire. The best strategy was to smile politely and let it slide. "You're not a charming daughter-in-law at all. If only someone like Alex was my daughter-in-law, we could have built a good relationship." I was surprised to hear Alex's name come up. It was fortunate that the topic came from her, otherwise it might have seemed suspicious if I brought it up. My mother-in-law continued without minding my presence. David and Alex have always been close. She used to say she would marry David. And now he's married to a woman who can barely manage household duties and doesn't care for her home. I'm truly disappointed. I'm sorry, I haven't lived up to expectations. Rather than making excuses, I apologized. Yet, my mother-in-law continued to grumble about me, repeatedly saying, Alex would have been a better wife. If David and Alex were to marry, my mother-in-law would undoubtedly be overjoyed. With that thought, I absently listened to her nagging. 2 months since Alex's first visit was about to pass. Her visits continued. I became numb to seeing the forgotten items of hers. Vanessa, there's something important I need to talk about. David, who is usually smiling, approached me with a serious expression that day. The unusual seriousness in his demeanor made me tense.
Yeah.
What is it? Are you free this weekend? I'd like to have a serious talk. That's fine, but does it have to wait until the weekend?
Yeah.
The weekend would be better. With that, David left the living room. What could this important talk be about? We seem to be fine when it's just the two of us. Could it be about Alex? I felt uneasy. Part of me wanted to get it over with quickly. And another part didn't want the weekend to come, a mix of feelings. When the weekend arrived, my suspicions seemed to be confirmed. Alex was there, looking unsurprised to be involved in the discussion. David was the first to speak. Vanessa. I want us to get a divorce. I somewhat anticipated this. I feared our marriage might be falling apart. Yet, I had hoped he would choose me in the end. To think that just one person could end our marriage so easily. Not even half a year into it, felt like a blow to the head. I like being needed. You being busy with work and leaving the household duties to me made me feel needed. I felt like I was supporting you. I thought so too. I believed it wasn't about gender roles, but about supporting each other in what we were good at and enjoyed. I thought we could do that together with David. But she can't do anything by herself. She can't live without my support. I need to be there for her. David really believed that. His desire to help someone in trouble and to be supportive was genuine. Whether it was right to abandon his wife to help someone else, however, was questionable. Glancing at Alex, she looked down but didn't seem remorseful. People who are sorry don't sit back comfortably and cross their legs on the sofa. She probably thought she finally managed to take David from me. David's obliviousness to these nuances might be considered a flaw. I suddenly felt foolish for being so serious about it. David's nature won't change. Even now, he might feel guilty towards me. But his actions were driven by a spirit of helping others. If I thought about it as him acting out of a desire to serve, it seemed unlikely that he would cut ties with Alex even if we didn't divorce. As long as I remained married to David, it seemed like this issue would haunt me forever. It felt quicker to just agree to the divorce now. I see. Regardless of the reason, I can't live with someone who has been unfaithful. Let's get divorced immediately. I printed out the divorce papers on my computer and thrust them in front of David. Sign it now. I'll sign it after and submit it immediately. David seemed taken aback by my swift action but took the papers and began to fill them out right there. I'm sorry for hurting you. But thank you for understanding. We will be happy. As he said this, David handed me the filled-out divorce papers. I took them without a word. As David and Alex were about to leave, Alex approached me and whispered, "We're going to live luxuriously from now on." Sorry for taking David from you. After saying that, Alex displayed a triumphant expression and left arm in arm with David. It seemed she was under a significant misunderstanding. But I no longer felt obligated to correct her. Regarding the divorce, I decided to hire a lawyer and arrange for a settlement. Since we had no children, the main discussion was about the division of property. Today, David, Alex, and I were supposed to meet at the lawyer's office to discuss. David declared he would agree to my terms. Alex objected discontentedly, but David silenced her, reminding her that it was only fair since they both hurt me. I demanded a fair division of property rights and sought compensation for their affair from both. Alex looked displeased at the mention of compensation, but her expression softened slightly when David said he would pay for both. After all the divorce procedures were completed, Alex stretched and addressed me. Finally, it's over. Well, I guess it was necessary for me to be happy with David. Vanessa, good luck living a frugal life. Alex laughed condescendingly at me. I didn't respond. David looked puzzled, but then joined the conversation. What are you talking about? Frugal life? What does that mean? Well, because she's divorcing you, right? Now she'll have to live a poor life. It's sad, really. Why would Vanessa be poor for divorcing me? Because you're a high earner, David. Since Vanessa is a housewife, she'll lose her income, right? Hearing Alex's words, David paused momentarily, then burst into laughter. What are you talking about? We're the ones who will be living the poor life. Huh? Alex looked at David and me in complete shock. I chose not to join the conversation. David, holding his stomach, continued laughing and speaking. Didn't I tell you Vanessa is the CEO? I never said I was the one working. You did say that, but I thought it was a joke. Was that true? Why would I lie about that? I was the house husband, and Vanessa was the one working. She's the president of the well-known ABC company. Hearing the company's name, Alex turned to me in disbelief. ABC company? The one that was on the news with annual sales of 150 million, that famous one? You're joking, right? I'm flattered you know of it. Let me reintroduce myself. I'm Vanessa, president of ABC Company. I handed her my business card. Alex took it slowly, still in shock. The business card clearly displayed the company name. Alex's hands trembled slightly. Why? Your mother said David was an elite high earner. How can this be? Hearing this, David was now the one surprised. I listened silently to their conversation, thinking that Alex and my mother-in-law must have been conspiring after all. Mom too, why is she under that impression? I've told you what Vanessa does, haven't I? But your mother keeps saying it's unthinkable for a woman to earn more. She also said a woman should do all the housework, and that failing to fulfill wifely duties is disgraceful, among other things. What? That's ridiculous. Such thinking is outdated. David sighed, clearly frustrated with his mother's views. But I chose you over Vanessa. It's not about the money, it's for love. You understand that, right? While David spoke to Alex with a smile. Alex just stood there, dazed, seemingly unable to follow the conversation. Can we conclude this discussion now? You both agree with what's been settled, right? Yes, this finalizes our procedures. I feel terrible for hurting you, Vanessa. I'll make sure we don't interfere with your life again. Good. Make sure that person there and your mother also get the message to stay out of my affairs. Understood. Then, we'll be going now. David supported a completely deflated Alex as they left the law office. The shock of learning her conquest was actually a homemaker must have been profound. Whether they can build a good relationship going forward is highly questionable. But that's no longer my concern. I felt relieved to be free from this mess and found myself feeling lighter. Then, one day, while I was enjoying my newly single life, my secretary informed me that a woman was causing a scene at the entrance, demanding to see me. She wasn't a business contact, and she insisted on seeing the president. Despite my busy schedule, I instructed my secretary to bring her to the reception room and to stay with me. As expected, Alex was there, looking frantic and out of sorts. I regretted giving her my business card that day. "What brings you to my office so suddenly? Don't you realize that causing a scene at the entrance is a nuisance? I don't know your contact details, and when I tried going to your house, the concierge stopped me at the entrance. I couldn't talk to you, so I had to come here. We finished our negotiations the other day, didn't we? I never wanted to see you again. I didn't come here because I wanted to." Alex slammed her hand on the table. My secretary looked displeased, but I gestured for her to stay calm. "That's right. I came here to complain to you." "Complaint?" "Yes. You said there was a division of assets, but what about that amount? For the president of a big company like you, aren't you being stingy?" Alex ranted, clearly lacking composure. "I'm not being stingy. It was a fair amount." "Lies." "It's true." I doubted she would back down easily. Despite finding it tedious, I decided to explain. First of all, our marriage lasted only 6 months. During that period, we split my income fairly. And from that, compensation was paid to you and David. So it's only natural that the amount you received was less. At the mention of compensation, Alex gasped. She realized why tens of thousands had vanished, the reason tied to the compensation. For her and David. Still, why can't we live in that high-rise apartment? And the furniture, all of it should be our shared property, right? It's unfair that you get to keep everything. Alex persisted, and I grew weary of dealing with her. I explained calmly, looking away. "By the way, I felt uncomfortable when you first came to my house and looked around so freely. If we bought it after getting married, as you said, it would indeed be shared property." "What do you mean?" "That high-rise apartment and the furniture in the house. I bought all of it when I was single. So, everything is mine. There's not even a 1% chance you could live there." Faced with these harsh realities, Alex was visibly shocked. She murmured almost inaudibly, "That can't be. I thought if I married David, I'd get the property. The luxurious furniture, everything. Too bad you were deluded. But, you got a kind and skilled homemaker as a husband. Be happy with that." That's exactly the problem. Reinvigorated by my comments, Alex raised her voice. "What now?" "David tells me to work. He says I'm suited to be a homemaker, so you should go out and earn. I married David thinking I could live easily without working. If one partner takes care of the home, it's only natural for the other to work." Though Alex has her own issues, David can't be blamed for complaining. His ability to be a homemaker was only feasible because he was with someone like me, who wanted to work outside. Someone like me, who loves to work, would find a partner who handles household chores like David very suitable. I've always lived at home and never really worked. Now I'm juggling part-time jobs, but can't secure a stable income because I can't get a full-time job. David doesn't get mad, but he says, with my cooking skills, I can easily whip up cheap meals. So let's save money together as a couple. It's so annoyingly positive. That's true. He can be a bit troublesome. David's positivity is one of his strengths, but his inability to read the room can be irritating at times. He keeps saying things like, even if we live a frugal life, as long as we're together, it's fine. I'm confident I can make simple dishes exciting every day. I thought you'd be the one struggling with a frugal life, and I was happy about it. If I knew it would turn out like this, I would never have married David. I don't need a man like that, take him back. Her frustration probably stems from not being able to live the lavish life she imagined. She's forced into poverty, with a nice but unambitious husband. It's her own fault for being self-centered, and now she's facing the consequences. It's all her fault, yet she needs to blame me to feel better about herself. However, I couldn't care less. I don't care about your feelings. And I don't need a man who's cheated, whatever the reason. Is that all you wanted to say? Then please leave. As I spoke, my secretary didn't wait for Alex's response and quickly called security to escort her out. I could hear her shouting in the hallway, but her voice faded away. I instructed the security to keep her out if they see her again. I sighed deeply, tired of all the drama. Since then, there had been no more visits from Alex, and I was able to work peacefully. One day, as I was leaving the office without having to work late, someone suddenly grabbed my arm. Startled and unable to speak, I cautiously looked to find my mother-in-law glaring at me with anger. There you are. I've been waiting for hours, and you just wouldn't come out. How could you turn away your mother-in-law from your home like that? What kind of person does that? Following Alex, my mother-in-law showed up. I had forgotten there was another troublesome person. Her relentless waiting for me to come out of the office was unsettling. I responded firmly, hiding my discomfort. David and I are divorced now, so we're strangers. There's no reason to let someone who has no relation to me into my home. I've made sure the building management knows only people I approve can enter. The nerve. Respect your elders. She yelled in a shrill voice I had never heard before, which was quite unpleasant to my ears. I would, if there were anything respectful about you. Besides, why are you laying in wait? What do you need? Laying in wait sounds so sinister. I came all this way because I have something important to tell you. I didn't ask for that. I wanted to run away from this place immediately to escape her, fearing she might lay in wait again. I didn't want to meet this woman ever again. But I decided to listen to her to end everything today. Why didn't you tell me honestly that David wasn't working? Because you deceived me, I'm suffering terribly now. I told you many times. I was working while David took care of our home. You called me a liar and ignored it every time. Blaming me for her own misunderstandings was troubling. Then, you should have made sure I understood. I started living with David and his wife thinking I could enjoy a luxurious life. But the house isn't a high-rise apartment, and it's a simple meal every day. I can't stand it. You were after money too. Like Alex, you suffer because you rely on others' money. Shut up. It's all your fault that I'm in this situation now. Pay me a living allowance for life. That's absurd. How could that possibly be justified? Besides, isn't your husband working? Even if David and Alex can't provide, you should be able to manage for now, right? Indeed. My father-in-law was still active. Although he had been on a long-term business trip for many years and rarely returned home. However, there were occasions when I met him a few times a year. And he was always very kind to me. Dealing with my mother-in-law's nagging was troublesome, but tolerable thanks to my father-in-law's kindness. Well, that's... She struggled to respond convincingly. When he came back recently, he found out about Alex's remarriage. And he divorced me. I was kicked out of the house, so I decided to live with David and Alex. It's natural for a father to ask questions when he returns after a long time and finds his son's wife has changed. My mother-in-law probably bad-mouthed me and made my father-in-law uncomfortable. But even after splitting with him, I thought I could live luxuriously because David was rich. So I asserted myself, and now I can't rely on your father-in-law either. It's truly astonishing. My father-in-law was a compassionate man who treated me kindly. If you reciprocated his feelings, he surely would have helped you. But this situation is your own doing because you disregarded everyone else. I certainly won't help you. My mother-in-law initially seemed a bit subdued, but as I firmly refused to help, her expression filled with anger again. How cruel. Inhuman. To think I have to beg someone like you. Whatever you say. If you continue to cause a scene, I'll call the police. It's a nuisance to have such commotion in front of my company. Hearing the word police, my mother-in-law's face turned pale. She bit her lip in frustration and left without saying anything else. Her shoulders slumped, burdened by despair. Here's what I heard from the lawyer later. Apparently, David, Alex, and my mother-in-law are still living together. David wanted to remain a homemaker, but realizing that Alex, and my mother-in-law couldn't earn enough together, he started looking for work. However, having not worked for several months without reasons like rehabilitation or caregiving, David could only find employment at a low-paying company. Eventually, David's salary alone wasn't enough. And Alex and my mother-in-law also had to take up part-time jobs just to scrape by. When David was the sole homemaker, the house was spotlessly clean. And homemade meals were served daily. Now, with everyone busy working, the house is a mess, meals are often pre-made, and arguments have become more frequent. Meanwhile, I was living a comfortable and carefree life. If I wanted a clean house, I could just hire a house cleaning service. And there were plenty of delicious dining options and deliveries available. I'm not averse to cooking, on the contrary, I sometimes find it a pleasant diversion. I was thoroughly enjoying my independent life. As for my work, I recently started a new business deal with the company where my father-in-law works, allowing us to meet again. Vanessa, I'm truly sorry. It's unforgivable what my foolish ex-wife and son have put you through. No amount of apologies can suffice. My father-in-law apologized to me, but he wasn't to blame for the recent events. Please, don't apologize. Although we're no longer family, I'd be happy if we could maintain a good relationship going forward. With that, my father-in-law smiled slightly and thanked me. After all this, I'm quite averse to romance for a while. I've decided to focus fully on my career.
Hey, is that you, Angela? Turning around at the voice while having coffee with my family at a cafe, there was my ex-husband Ted. Beside him stood Erica, the woman who took him away from me. Oh. What, you got married? I just glared at him in silence. Then he said, "Oh right, still single, huh? The infertile defective product. Are you planning to remarry with someone who has kids? A remarriage would suit you well." Ted seemed to find this situation amusing as he said these things. I stood up abruptly, slamming the table. "Excuse me? Who are you calling infertile? What, it's not true. Just kidding around." Ted chuckled. We left the cafe feeling sick. As we were leaving, a girl who looked like their daughter passed by us. "Ms. Powell." The girl called out loudly as she ran towards me. Panting, she said, "I'm Michelle, his daughter." I have something very important to tell you, Ms. Powell. My name is Angela Powell, 45 years old. I live with my 3 years younger husband, Robert, our daughter Sarah, and my in-laws, making it a family of 5. Robert is a chef, and I'm in a sort of sales job. We're both somewhat workaholics. I sometimes wonder if this makes Sarah feel lonely. However, living with the in-laws who understand our work and are kind yet strict with Sarah allows us to focus on our jobs. Occasionally, on our days off, my husband showcases his exquisite cooking. Sarah envies his skills, and whenever there's a chance, she learns cooking from him. But 17 years ago, I couldn't have imagined such happy days would come my way. Because for me, Robert is my second husband. I divorced 17 years ago. My ex was Ted Walters, a colleague who was 5 years my senior. In my 20s, after getting married, I moved from sales to general affairs, continuing to work while being a housewife. I thought I was having a fairly good marriage life, but apparently, I was the only one who thought so. Because one day, Ted suddenly demanded a divorce. Hey, what's going on? Why suddenly? I was shocked as I was confronted with the divorce papers. I didn't understand what was happening. Then, Ted looked more serious than ever before. You know, you still haven't had any kids, right? I was surprised. Ted had never mentioned such a thing since we got married. However, my mother-in-law had often urged us. Living with my in-laws, for 3 years after marriage, I was constantly nagged about having children. But I thought I had kept this from Ted as much as possible. I was concerned about not being able to have children. However, I felt that forcing fertility treatments wouldn't immediately change the situation. It would happen when it could. I thought so, but that was naive. Are you divorcing me because I can't have children? That's not the only reason. I had a bad feeling then. Remember Erica? Your coworker from the sales department? I remember her. What about her? Just as I had a thought, Ted spoke. Look, Erica is pregnant with my child. What? I was at a loss for words. Everything was a complete shock to me. Not only that Ted was having an affair, but that it was with Erica, my coworker. You're divorcing me because she's pregnant? I can't accept being told unilaterally to divorce. I argued as strongly as I could. But Ted said nonchalantly. But Mom agrees with it. At that moment, I realized that was where the conversation had originated. When I pressed for confirmation, yes, I support Ted being with Erica. My mother-in-law answered simply. Why? Doesn't that mean Ted cheated on me? Can you really accept that? Yes, I can. I was at a loss for words to her response. Because you've shown no signs of having children. I've been worried about you all this time. But, from their point of view, maybe it was a concern. You two never said you weren't trying. So it must be an issue with your body. And Ted continued. See, I told you. Mom just wanted to see her grandkids. And since there was no sign of that happening with you, it couldn't be helped, right? Saying this, Ted pushed the divorce papers in front of me, dumbfounded. I resigned myself to the fact that I had no place left to go, and signed and stamped the divorce papers. Looking back, I should have insisted on a fair division of assets and demanded alimony at that time. But I wasn't in a state to make sound decisions then. The reason for our divorce spread quickly at the company. Meanwhile, Erica quit her job and seemed to easily settle into being a full-time housewife after her pregnancy. As for me, instead of being seen as a poor woman who was cheated on, rumors spread that I was unattractive enough to lose my husband. Eventually, I quit the company. Unable to bear the curious glances and rumors, I withdrew into a small apartment where I moved. But I couldn't just hide forever, hunger drove me outside. Not being particularly skilled in cooking, one day I ventured out and was drawn to the smell of stew from a small restaurant. As I stared at the menu for a long time, the cook's voice asked me what I'd like to order. It seemed I had been looking at the menu for quite a while. That's when I realized how tired I was feeling. As I ate, I couldn't help but cry and sniffle. Yet, as I quietly continued eating, the cook placed extra napkins in front of me. That cook was Robert, who would later become my husband. From then on, I frequented his restaurant, and we eventually started dating. Even though I was an older divorcee, our feelings for each other didn't change, and we got married relatively quickly. Soon after our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant with our daughter, Sarah. Unlike my previous in-laws, Robert's parents were wonderful people. I am truly grateful to my in-laws, who treat me like their own daughter as my parents live far away. They even encouraged me to work if I didn't want to stay home all the time. I ended up helping at the restaurant, where they needed more hands, and I took over the accounting part, which the owner disliked. Later, the owner retired due to health issues, and Robert, whose skills were recognized, took over the restaurant. For over a decade since then, both our work and parenting went smoothly. One day, Robert, Sarah, and I were cafe hopping. It was half enjoyment, half study for us. While discussing things like, "This menu is good," and "Maybe this place should reconsider their portion sizes," we heard a familiar voice. "Hey, isn't that Angela?" Turning around at the voice, there was Ted, a man I had almost forgotten. And next to him was, "Ah, it really is Angela. Remember me? It's Erica." A woman, sounding childishly sweet despite her age. Erica was there. If I remember correctly, she was 5 years younger than me, so she should be around 40 now. Still trying to look younger than her age, her fashion and makeup were somewhat inappropriate. "It's been a while," I responded in a stiff voice. Seeing my expression, Robert and Sarah looked worried. Then Ted pressed on. "Oh. What, you got married?" I just glared at him silently. Then he said, "Oh right, still single, huh? The infertile defective product. Are you planning to remarry with someone who has kids? A remarriage would suit you well." Ted seemed to find this situation amusing as he said these things. Robert and Sarah looked bewildered by his off-target comments. I stood up, slamming the table. "Excuse me? Who are you calling infertile? What? Angela, why are you suddenly getting angry? What, isn't it true? You can't have kids, so you married someone with kids, right? What is wrong with these people?" I gestured towards Robert and Sarah and finally spoke firmly. "That's not true. I married this man a long time ago, and this child is the one I gave birth to." "Come on, lying again." Ted chuckled. I was appalled. How could he keep ignoring my words and insist I was infertile? "Shall we leave here?" Robert suggested as he saw my distress. Sarah also looked uneasy. "Yes, let's go. I don't want anything to do with this." "Oh right, so this seat will be free then. Hey, come over here." As we were about to leave, a high school-aged girl approached the entrance somewhat timidly. Ah, that must be the child Erica was pregnant with back then. I thought this as I passed by the girl. Let's forget about this place and head to the next cafe. Yes, let's enjoy some coffee properly this time. We checked the map, and just then, the girl shouted, "Ms. Powell." As she ran towards us, breathing heavily. Panting, she said, "I'm Michelle, his daughter. Ms. Powell, I have something very important to tell you." She appealed to me desperately. And that was the first step in changing our fate. 6 months later, I was heading to a building for a meeting. My destination was a company on an upper floor. "Excuse me, I have an appointment with Daniel, the sales director." "Sorry to keep you waiting, Miss Powell," he started to say, then paused with a realization. "Could it be, Ms. Norman?" Daniel, the sales director, called me by my maiden name. "Yes, this is the company where I used to work." "Yes, it's been a long time, Daniel." I gave a bright smile to my former boss. "So, the tenant moving in downstairs is?" "Yes, it's my shop." "Oh. What a surprise." Daniel reacted with a bit of an exaggerated surprise. I'm really sorry about back then. I couldn't do anything. Daniel, you were in a different department back then, and I think it was impossible for you to stop those tactless people. Yes, that's true. But I still feel bad about the unpleasant experiences I caused you, being his boss and all. Just then, Ted Walters, who seemed to have returned from a sales visit, entered the floor. Angela, why are you here? Did you come because you met me the other day? I just silently watched Ted, who still dared to joke in such a place. Does he realize his boss is nearby? Hey, you aren't thinking of getting back together, are you? Hey, what are you saying? Daniel said this while calming Ted down. It seemed that Ted finally realized that I was with my former boss. He quickly wore a solemn expression in apology. Ms. Powell is here today for a business discussion. A business discussion? You know the tenant space on the first floor that's been vacant for a while? Now that you mention it. My shop will be moving in there. Ted Walters looked puzzled. Wait a minute. Isn't a famous coffee chain supposed to be moving into that tenant space? Yes, that's right, isn't it, Daniel? I turned the conversation to Daniel. Yes, that's right. Everyone's been looking forward to that store moving in. So what, you joined the sales department of that chain store? No. I paused briefly before continuing. It's my shop, any problem with that? Ted Walters looked even more confused. Hey, Ted, I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but didn't I tell you that today's visitor is Miss Powell, the owner of that chain store? The owner? Ted shouted, then looked back and forth between Mr. Daniel and me, sweating. Listen, Ted. Today is strictly about business discussions. Be respectful. Sorry about this, Ms. Powell. No worries. Although today is for business, I actually wanted to offer some of our coffee for the people at this company to try. As soon as I said this, there was a sudden buzz around the floor. Wait, are you treating us to coffee from that store? The young office lady reacted quickly. Yes, that's right. I hope you all will become our most valued customers, and I look forward to a long relationship. Today, before the shop officially opens, I would like to offer you a taste. Please feel free to visit the shop afterwards. I looked at Daniel and said, Is that okay with you, Daniel? Daniel responded, Yes, let's happily accept the invitation. Everyone, let's go. Almost everyone on the floor, except for a few who stayed behind, headed down together. Welcome, said the new store manager, greeting. Our staff, who had been waiting, greeted the employees. Please, everyone, have a seat wherever you like, I said, and the employees began to take their seats with unusual eagerness. Our coffee isn't incredibly unique. It's more affordable and simpler than a certain well-known coffee shop that's heavy on toppings. Our selling points are a clear menu and delicious meals. We offer takeout for those who want it at lunch and a slightly pricier but tasty dinner option. The success of our first store, which crafted such a menu, led to its prosperity. After it became successful, we trained staff and expanded our stores, and now I am the president of a coffee chain with an annual turnover of $50 million. So, how about this spot over here for you folks? I invited Daniel and Ted to a table somewhat removed from the others. Then, several people stood up. What? Ted was surprised by their appearance. Wait, Michelle, why are you here? Why? Well. Michelle snorted and continued. Because I'm a customer today too. But, isn't this place only for related personnel today? Ted hurriedly replied. Because I'm also involved today. Oh, and by the way, Dad, my other father is here too. Ted seemed not to immediately grasp the meaning of his daughter's words. Michelle continued, ignoring her father's puzzled look. Let me introduce you. This is Jeff Morris, my real father. Ted looked even more confused by what was being said. Well, it's understandable that you wouldn't know, Dad. We need one more guest to arrive here. Saying this, Michelle turned towards the display window. Beyond it, a woman was hurriedly walking towards us, looking around anxiously. It was Erica, trying to look excessively young, just like when we had reunited half a year ago. Erica, in a panic, opened the door and exclaimed, "Michelle, where's Michelle?" As she rushed over. "Here comes another guest." "Mom, over here," Michelle said calmly. Hearing her voice, Erica turned and quickly approached, her face registering shock. "Michelle, why are you with this man?" she asked with a trembling voice. "Why?" "Because he's also my father," Michelle continued, her voice steady in front of her stunned mother. Watching the two of them, Ted seemed to finally understand the situation. "Hey Erica, do you know anything about this? Do you have a relationship with this man?" "I don't know him." "I don't know this man at all." She vigorously shook her head, trying to flee the scene, but Robert and I stopped her. "Since you've come all this way, why not stay for a cup of coffee?" I offered Erica a chair and signaled to the staff to bring some coffee. Indeed, our coffee has been quite popular lately. "You really should have a cup before you go," I said, practically forcing her to take a seat. What a brave young woman, despite being only 16, I thought to myself. Yes, that day, Michelle had chased after us to seek advice. The reason she came to me was that she had heard I was once her father's wife. Her concern, as we sat down in a newly entered cafe, was about a man claiming to be her real father. "I understand that you divorced my father because I was born." "Who told you that?" "My grandmother. My former mother-in-law. She had actually gone out of her way to tell her granddaughter such a thing. It seemed just like her." "Have you discussed this with anyone else?" Michelle replied she hadn't talked to anyone about it. "Is it all right for you to discuss such important matters with me, almost a stranger? Haven't you talked to your mother about it?" "I don't want to. I don't trust my mom, especially when it comes to relationships with men." Michelle said this matter-of-factly. Because I can't trust my mom, I thought maybe this man could really be my father. She was referring to Jeff, who was with us today. Initially skeptical, she grew more convinced as they talked about gifts he mentioned giving her in the past. "When I was younger, my mom would suddenly give me expensive clothes and accessories, always when my dad was away on business trips. As a child, she was merely happy to receive such special gifts, but as she grew older, she started to feel something was off. During a conversation with Jeff, she asked if he ever sent her gifts. Jeff immediately smiled, pleased to hear that she had received them. Further questioning revealed that Jeff remembered the details and timing of these gifts well, matching Michelle's memories. So, I decided to ask for a DNA test with him. Hearing this, I was struck by how strong she was to initiate such a step herself. "But saying that, what do you think about your parents?" "I don't really care about my father. He's rarely home, and I don't even know if it's because of his job." Ted, it seems, had become an indifferent parent, despite using the desire for children as a reason to leave me. Michelle's next words surprised me even more. "Mom might be dating someone, I'm not sure, but there's definitely another man she likes. I saw them together coming home in a taxi recently." Her sarcastic tone was painful to hear. "But you were with your family at the cafe recently, weren't you?" "That was just for show. Dad forced us to go, calling it family time." "In contrast, your family seemed genuinely happy." She said this with a hint of sadness. "Excuse me for asking, but isn't your daughter a stepchild?" "Absolutely not. This child was born to me." I hugged Sarah as I spoke firmly. "Then that time, Dad was really rude to you." "I've heard about it since then." "Yes. In the past, your father and grandmother used that as a reason to force a divorce on me. But after I remarried, I had this child immediately and have been living happily ever since. I had completely forgotten about your family, to be honest. I didn't even recognize them immediately." "Is that so?" "I'm envious." Hearing this, I felt compelled to help her. It seemed that family was still troubled, as always. Over the past 6 months, I had been present during meetings between Michelle and Jeff, ultimately arranging for today's meeting. It's really been a while, Erica. Jeff Morris laughed as he said this. I don't know anything about you. Erica said this in a flustered manner. Well, I must have changed a lot too. But DNA doesn't change. With that, Jeff presented Ted and Erica with a DNA test result. Both took it and looked intently. The results showed no parental relationship between Michelle and Ted, but a nearly 100% match with Jeff. Realizing the implication, Ted suddenly looked at Erica, his complexion changing. Erica, seeing his reaction, became visibly more anxious. No, this is a lie, it's forged. Jeff replied. Then I think you should test as many times as you want. Well, I believe it will be the same no matter how many times you test it. In fact, here are the results from several tests. He smoothly pulled out more test results, presumably from different agencies. At this, Erica lunged at Michelle. How could you do this to me? What do you mean, how could I? Where did you come from today, Mom? What are you saying? Then, Michelle rummaged through her bag, took out her smartphone, and after a few taps, turned the screen towards Erica. I received this. Displayed were images of Erica entering and leaving a hotel with another man. It's been photoshopped. It has to be. No, that's not the case. Jeff said. How can you say that? What gives you the right? Because I am not interested in taking this child from you. You can't possibly do that. Erica exclaimed. I can if the parent-child relationship is proven. And, Mr. Walters, can you really handle the fact that she has been deceiving you all along? Ted was at a loss for words. Cuckolded? At his voice, the whispering office ladies started to murmur among themselves. Indeed, I had invited company people here to make this issue known. Daniel came over to calm the office ladies. Ted, what is this all about? I don't know. I'd like to know myself. Sweat was visible on Ted's forehead. But you, Ted, left Miss Powell to marry your current wife, and now you're causing trouble at home again? That's a bit unbecoming for someone who's supposed to be an executive. What do you mean? Ted looked around nervously and suddenly yelled. Stop looking at me. In reality, no one was openly staring at him, they were merely glancing discreetly. However, for Ted, even those fleeting glances felt piercing. Erica, seeing her husband's distress, became visibly unsettled. What does this mean? What should we do? It's about time for you to come forward. It's your turn. Signaling with that, a man from a distant table approached. This is the lawyer I've hired. I'm prepared to dispute the recognition and custody of this child, what about you? Ted was speechless, frozen in place. Jeff continued to press him. Is there something wrong? You've been raising another man's child all this time. Doesn't that upset you? It's upsetting, yes. But, without a child, my mother. Oh, right. I blurted out. You were always weak to your mother, weren't you? The murmurs around grew a bit louder. The office ladies whispered. Ted has always been a mama's boy. Michelle, what do you want? You won't betray me, your father, right? As Ted frantically spoke, Michelle pondered. Honestly, it doesn't really matter to me. Ted was visibly shocked by her words. Perhaps he had loved his daughter in his own way, and her indifference cut deep. You know, Dad, I think you're just too oblivious. Not just about Mom, but about me too. What do you mean? I've been meeting with this dad for over half a year. You didn't know anything, did you? I knew you weren't interested in me. Maybe you were too busy with work. But how could you not notice Mom's affair? What have you been working for? Sweat started dripping down Ted's cheeks. Now, let's not say things we can't take back. It was Jeff who calmed the situation. I understand. Even if I disappeared, this dad wouldn't run to look for me, he'd do it for Grandma. You always say, ah, good grades, Grandma will be happy, or being smart must be our genes, never mentioning anything from Mom's side. Hearing this, Erica turned her head away from her daughter. So, Dad, you just wanted a child for Grandma's sake, right? What do you say? Ted was lost for words. Michelle's face fell slightly. See. This is the kind of person he is, she said to Jeff. At that moment, Erica suddenly shouted. Michelle. What are you saying? Your father has been working hard for us every day. The same dad you easily betray, Mom? You didn't notice either. Well, yeah, I wasn't home much anyway. And when I brought it up, Mr. Morris checked it for me. Checked it? Yes. The lawyer responded. Mr. Morris asked me to investigate your affair. We used a detective agency and secured solid evidence. Those photos earlier are just part of it. My goodness. Daniel sighed as he watched the chaos unfold. To think you've caused all this trouble. Ted, you were excellent at your job in sales, but it turns out you can't even manage your own home. No, but it's not my fault. Ted's words grew weaker. Jeff pressed further. So, what will you do? As I said before, I'm ready to fight this. As he was speaking, Ted suddenly collapsed. Call an ambulance. The room erupted into chaos. It seemed Ted couldn't handle everything crashing down around him all at once. There's no helping it. Let's discuss this calmly later. Suddenly, Erica turned to Jeff and spat bitterly. You've come up in the world, using lawyers and detectives so easily. You're not like you used to be. That's right. Jeff answered matter-of-factly. That's because I got rid of a gold-digging disaster like you. I've found better finances, a better job, and a wonderful wife. Hearing this, Erica slumped her shoulders right there. I apologize for causing a scene. Please enjoy your time. I smiled at the office ladies who were keenly watching the drama unfold. After that, it wasn't long before Ted and Erica divorced. My former mother-in-law was furious with Erica for several reasons. One was obviously the cuckolding, but another was the revelation that Ted was infertile, a fact he hadn't even bothered to check himself, which fueled his mother's rage. After the storm settled, she visibly aged rapidly. Apparently, she even began showing signs of dementia. She needed care, and it was certain. Given his poor management at home and the recent family drama, he was sidelined in his job, Daniel informed me. Honestly, for Ted now, that sideline position might be all he can handle. The several shocks had severely affected his mental health. Having always believed he was right, to learn not only that I wasn't infertile but that he was sterile, and that his beloved daughter had so readily written him off, was too much. It seems that a multitude of issues suddenly overwhelmed him, and the tension he had maintained to confidently navigate through society abruptly snapped. On the other hand, Erica tried to turn to her affair partner after the divorce, but he desperately claimed it was a fling, that he hadn't known she was married or her real age, and somehow slipped away. Apparently, Erica had been pretending to be 10 years younger during her affairs. When her lover found out her real age, the disgust was evident, the lawyer told me. After being abandoned, Erica tried to turn to her parents but was rejected and soon found herself utterly without refuge. A woman who had secretly cheated while playing the devoted homemaker was left with nothing. I think it's best that she experiences the full consequences of her actions. Michelle, however, was taken in by her biological father and his wife. They pleaded with her to stay with them, even if just until she was an adult. Mr. Morris's wife had been unable to have children, and over 6 months, she and Michelle had grown close. A child should have no sins, she deserves happiness from here on out. Meanwhile, the new store prospered, perhaps because of the little drama, and we became good friends with the company upstairs. To the office ladies, the story of a divorced wife who managed to become the president of a chain store was something of an aspiration. It feels a bit funny being seen that way, but times have changed, I think. And Michelle and my daughter Sarah keep in touch, oddly enough. Kids make friends in the strangest ways, despite the rivalry between their mothers. Robert watches over such a family with a warm gaze. As I cherish this family, I intend to work hard and live happily, thinking of both my career and my home.
Sarah and I have already submitted our marriage certificate. So, no matter how much you cry and plead, the divorce is finalized. We are officially husband and wife. I had to wait quite a while because you wouldn't agree to separate. Sarah looked at me with an unpleasant expression. Perhaps thinking of the time she had been made to wait. I am kind, so I was thinking about how to leave you without hurting you as much as possible. But then you collapsed, so I had a good reason. Andrew is really kind. But because of that, I had to wait a long time and it made me so angry. Both of them gave me their selfish reasons. We're divorcing because you're useless at both home and work. I'll also claim compensation. There was much I wanted to say. But it was pointless to speak to people who boldly say such unreasonable things. I decided to accept the divorce thinking that. Understood. But 7 days later, Andrew called me crying. My name is Jenny White. I am 27 years old. I work at a real estate company. I got married 2 years ago, and now I live with my husband Andrew. Before that, I lived with my mother. My parents divorced when I was young, and my mother raised me alone. However, my father also paid child support, and my mother was an independent woman. So I never experienced financial hardship. I was also cherished by grandparents from both families. They celebrated events like First Communion, school entrance, and graduation ceremonies. And I can say I grew up without lacking love. Now, my mother lives about a 10-minute walk from our house. I find time between my busy job to have lunch or coffee with her. I also keep in fairly regular contact with my grandparents. I see my father the least often, but he doesn't treat me poorly at all. Rather, he seems to be considerate of my mother. We do keep in touch, and it feels somewhat like he's a father on a business assignment. I grew up without any hardships. But there was always a part of me that was conscious of being a child from a divorced family. And I continued to long for a family where the parents were together. Perhaps because of that, I had a strong desire not to divorce myself. As a result, I ended up in a difficult marriage. Andrew and I started dating because I was in charge. When he came to look for a new house at the branch where I work. My first room was like a dormitory with one bathroom that we all shared. My salary has gone up a bit, and I'd like to live in a slightly better room. After showing him a significant number of properties based on such a request, we found we had similar hobbies and got closer during our talks. Could we exchange contact details? Although it's not ideal to exchange personal contacts with a client, I wanted to talk more. So I ended up giving him my personal account. That led to dating and eventually marriage. The current room you found for me, the lease renewal is coming up. So, I thought why not move into a room we can live in together, could you find one again? That was Andrew's proposal. We had a small, family-only wedding. I have few relatives, and Andrew's parents are not very social, so it was agreed that was fine. The attendees were my mother, my in-laws, and grandparents from my mother's and Andrew's sides. After reciting our vows in a chapel, we just rented a small restaurant for a meal. A simple wedding ceremony. But I was filled with happiness. My father and his parents said congratulations when I went to inform them of the wedding. And they celebrated with us. They didn't attend the wedding, out of consideration for my mother. It's not that they neglected me. My father and I maintain a good relationship at that distance. That's how our marriage began. The apartment is a 2-room new rental condo. Of course, it's managed by my company, and I searched hard for it. It's not very large, but it's spacious enough for a newlywed couple to start living together. The location is convenient for both our workplaces, and I think we found a pretty good room. You really are a pro, finding such a good room. My first room was like that too, but I really think you're suited to be a real estate agent. Andrew was pleased with the room, and I felt satisfied in both my work and personal life. That's how our married life started out happily. The agreement was to share household chores. But Andrew's work as a salesman often meant he came home late. And since I generally got home on time, I ended up doing most of the housework. Most nights, when he came home late, Andrew was usually drunk. I was forced to drink because of socializing. I'm not that strong a drinker, it's troubling. I understand. But don't overdo it. I know. Sorry for making you worry. Andrew said this and hugged me tightly. It was truly a time like a newlywed. However, about 6 months later, Andrew's behavior began to change. Even though we were still newlyweds, it was as if the honeymoon period had ended. And he began to look down on my work. You're home already? It must be easy working at a real estate reception. Do you even have to work overtime? Our shop has evening hours for customers who can only come at night. So there's hardly any overtime after daytime shifts. That must be comfortable. Why don't you work at night too? Since it's an easy job, it wouldn't make much difference to work a little longer. I'd be troubled if I had to rely only on my income. Let me clarify that both of us work, and we share the household expenses equally. There is no truth to the claim that I rely solely on Andrew's income. How many hours did you work today? Just moving a bit when someone comes to the store. And you get paid for that. Real estate must be such an easy job. But Andrew's remarks only got worse from there. It's not like that. I communicate with clients, talk to landlords, handle repair requests from tenants, and there are many other things to do. Enough already. No matter what you say, in the end, it's a passive job, isn't it? You don't try to do anything new, do you? Andrew continued to belittle my work. Why would you say such awful things? The Andrew I knew before wasn't like this. Awful? Am I really saying something that bad? I think I'm just stating the obvious. Andrew glared at me and continued. It's wrong to ask me to do household chores when our jobs are so different. So that's it. I realized Andrew probably felt guilty about leaving all the household responsibilities to me. And that's why he acted this way. Sorry, I just entered a busy period and I've inevitably put a burden on you, Jenny. At first, he used to apologize, but now he acts as if it's natural for me to do everything. Even scattering his laundry on the floor. Could you at least put it in the laundry basket? Stop nagging. If you find it on the floor, just pick it up yourself and put it in the basket. It's something you can do instead of complaining to me. The conversation was getting nowhere. Although it was unpleasant, it's true that Andrew's job was busier, and I had more time. So I silently took on the household chores. I believed that once his work calmed down, he would return to the old Andrew I loved. But there was no sign of him returning to the way he was before our marriage. Perhaps because I silently took on the chores, Andrew became increasingly arrogant. You're not doing much work anyway, right? Then at least keep the house clean. Even though I have more time, I'm still working too. There are places I just can't reach. We started living in this new condo after getting married. And I've tried my best to maintain its newness. But Andrew, like picking at the corners of a box, searches for places I haven't cleaned and gets angry, calling it neglect. If you can't handle the household chores, why don't you just quit your job? That's what he started saying. Frankly, it would be tough to continue living comfortably in our current apartment on just Andrew's income alone. When I showed him the numbers to explain this, Andrew became furious. So you finally said it. You think my salary is low, and you're looking down on me. I couldn't understand what he was accusing me of. Wait, I've never said that. Liar. Ever since we got married and knew each other's salaries, you've been telling me to do the housework. You thought that way because my salary is low. I had misunderstood. I thought Andrew felt sorry because he was busy and couldn't do the household chores. But his real feelings were different. After getting married, it turned out that my salary was higher than his. That fact hurt Andrew's pride. And he felt demeaned because he thought he was being made to do the household chores because his salary was lower. My salary is low anyway. You must feel great knowing you earn more. It's not that much of a difference. But the hours we work are different.
Ah.
So that's it. I understood another thing. Andrew probably feels like he's losing not only in total salary but also in hourly wage. That's why he was so critical about me having almost no overtime. That's not my opinion. I've never looked down on you. But if I made you feel that way, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware of it, but maybe I had hurt Andrew without realizing it. Thinking this, I apologized to Andrew. Good that you understand. Remember, in a marriage, the husband is superior. If you can understand that, you'd better take care of the house properly. I thought it was unreasonable, but since my words calmed Andrew down a bit, I thought it was okay. Coming from a divorced family, I had a strong desire not to do the same. I didn't want to have a falling out with Andrew. I had told him that, so he should understand my feelings. I thought I just needed to endure a little. If we both insisted on our own opinions, it would only hurt us and make our relationship worse. If I could just compromise a little, we could live together without conflict. I thought this would bring our peaceful life back. Andrew would return to the kind person he was before we got married. But that was wishful thinking. Thinking he had subdued me, Andrew became more arrogant, acting like a king and treating me like a servant. Listen, you just need to do as I say. Don't even think about having your own opinion. Yes, I understand. A person who doesn't want to do anything themselves should just quietly listen to someone who is motivated. Remember, always speak to me with respect. Before I knew it, I couldn't talk back to Andrew at all. I had heard that a frog thrown into hot water will jump out in shock. But if it's placed in water that slowly heats up, it won't notice until it's too late and ends up getting cooked. I was like that frog. Maybe I had been piling on too much without realizing it. One day, I suddenly collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. 2 weeks after being hospitalized, Andrew came to visit. But as soon as he entered the room, he grinned and said, "You really are useless, aren't you?" Next to him stood a woman I had never seen before. "I'm sorry for becoming like this. I'll try my best to come home as soon as possible. So please forgive me. No need to push yourself. Take all the time you need to recover." Really? Is that okay? I was surprised by his unexpected words. I thought Andrew would surely blame me.
Yeah.
It's fine. Because you and I are going to have nothing to do with each other anymore. What do you mean? Andrew, you're slow on the uptake, aren't you? It means I'm divorcing you and marrying Sarah. Andrew pulled the woman he called Sarah close to him, and she leaned happily against him. Sarah was a woman who appeared much older than Andrew, with flashy makeup. Actually, it's all taken care of. I haven't signed any divorce papers. You're useless and now sick too. You have no value to me anymore. That's why I've filed for divorce. So, he's saying he forged the divorce papers. That can't possibly be legal. Well, it worked. Andrew and the woman smirked and laughed together. And who is this person? Oh, she's my new wife. Nice to meet you, I'm Sarah, Andrew's new wife. Sarah said this with a triumphant look. Sarah and I have already submitted our marriage registration. So, no matter how much you cry and beg, the divorce is final, we are officially married. I had to wait quite a while because you wouldn't agree to separate. Sarah looked at me with an annoyed expression. Perhaps thinking of the time she had been made to wait. Waited? How long are we talking about? Oh, you could not imagine. It's been a year. So they had been in a relationship for a year. You wouldn't understand how precious a year is in the life of a woman in her 30s. And how old are you? I might look younger, but I'm 38. Sarah said proudly, her heavy makeup nearly cracking with her smile. She looked her age, but it seemed wiser not to point that out. I was kind because I was trying to figure out the best way to leave you. Without hurting you as much as possible. But then you collapsed, so I had a good reason. Andrew is really kind. But because of that, I had to wait a long time and it made me so angry. Both of them continued to make such selfish remarks to me. Imagine being married to someone who can't handle home or work. And I will be asking for compensation. There was much I wanted to say. But it was pointless to speak to people who boldly say such unreasonable things. I decided to accept the divorce thinking that. Understood. As I said that, the two of them left looking satisfied. You'll see. I muttered to myself and pulled out my smartphone from under the blanket. I had recorded the entire conversation. With this, I should be able to expose Andrew's wrongdoing. When I was hospitalized, it seems I was in a dangerous state in many ways. Continuing to listen to Andrew, I had become unable to think for myself. Watching Andrew's moods, making sure not to upset him. Doing housework to his satisfaction. And working just to keep living, it was all due to exhaustion. Without eating properly or resting, I just kept moving to please Andrew until I suddenly collapsed. I remember being told by a colleague that I looked thinner. But I replied that I was dieting because I thought Andrew would be displeased. If he knew someone was worried about me. It started with just a little compromise. But as I gradually conceded more and more ground to Andrew, I found myself backed into a corner without even realizing it. I was really shocked. I thought you were living happily. My mother, who rushed to the hospital, said this with tears in her eyes. I still don't understand what went wrong. It was true. I just wanted to live happily with Andrew. I thought I was just enduring a little bit, but I didn't understand why things turned out this way. And what about Andrew? Why hasn't he said anything after hearing you collapsed? He used to be such a kind person, what happened? I wanted to ask that myself. It was hard to explain everything to my mother in a few words. For now, just rest. We can think about what to do next later. I ended up being hospitalized for a while. Maybe because I was resting both mentally and physically, the fog in my mind started to clear. Why was I listening to Andrew? Gradually, I began to think for myself again. And realized that it would be difficult to continue married life with Andrew as it was. That's when Andrew came to the hospital with Sarah. Andrew thought he could still control me, but by that time, I was fully awake. Yet, I decided to pretend to be under his control a little longer. And quietly turned on the recording function on my smartphone under the blanket. Currently, my smartphone contains evidence that Andrew forged the divorce papers. This surely constitutes a crime. Upon investigation, I discovered it qualifies as forgery of a sealed private document, punishable by imprisonment from 3 months to 5 years. Often you hear imprisonment or a fine of significant amount. But there is no fine for this crime, only imprisonment. This implies that, unless given a suspended sentence, one must serve time in prison. It feels like a particularly serious offense when only imprisonment is the option. So, Andrew did that much to me. There's no reason to hold back against such a villain. I made a call to someone from the smartphone in my hand. I was discharged from the hospital 5 days after Andrew's visit. But I didn't return to the house where I had lived with him. I had lived in that house for 2 years, the first 6 months were happy. But then Andrew gradually changed and became a tyrant by the end of the year. It was probably around the time he met Sarah. What I don't understand is, if he wanted to divorce me and marry Sarah, why did he need to manipulate me? What was Andrew's goal in doing all that? But now, rather than pondering this, I have something else to do. Having regained my mental and physical health, I have decided to get my revenge. 2 days after my discharge, which was 7 days after Andrew and Sarah visited the hospital, Andrew called as I expected. "Jenny? I'm glad you picked up. Where are you? Why haven't you come home?" I was appalled at how shamelessly he could say such things. I was speechless. "Who is this? Stop joking around." "It's me, Andrew, your husband." "I don't have a husband." If Andrew filed the divorce papers and married Sarah, he is now her husband, not mine. "Didn't you divorce me and remarry Sarah? Then you are her husband and no longer have anything to do with me." "It's okay, I'll divorce her and remarry you, so don't worry about anything." "No one is worried about that, I was merely stating a fact." "I'm not worried at all. I have no intention of remarrying you. Please be happy with Sarah. It's a misunderstanding. You're the only one I love, believe me." While saying this, Andrew started crying over the phone. Did he think that crying would move my heart? I was being threatened. Sarah is the daughter of the president of our company. They said they'd fire me if I didn't date her. I was just going along with it reluctantly, believe me. Andrew continued to plead through his tears. Was the forgery of the divorce papers also ordered by Sarah? Yes. She said she'd make you suffer if I didn't do it. I intend to sue you for forgery of a sealed private document. Upon hearing he would be sued, Andrew stopped crying and fell silent. By the way, it's time to renew the lease on that house. I won't be renewing it. It's good timing to switch everything, house, marriage, and affection, nothing wasted. Wait. I love you, listen to me. Unfortunately, our company won't be able to assist you in finding a new home. Please use another company. Goodbye. I ignored Andrew's crying and hung up the phone, then blocked his number. The reason Andrew was so desperate to contact me was because he learned the truth. Perhaps he saw a newspaper article or a TV news report this morning about my parents. The presidents of Thompson Home remarry. My parents, who had divorced when I was young, had remarried. Seeing a photo of me with them, Andrew must have realized that I am the daughter of the president of Thompson Home. My father, or rather, his ancestors were large landowners. And Thompson Home was started based on the real estate they owned. Even today, our company, Thompson Home, manages numerous houses and buildings across the U.S. I work at one of its branches. Our parents didn't divorce out of hatred for each other. My mother, skilled with her hands, started making jewelry as a hobby, which became popular and turned into a business. This upset my paternal grandmother, who owned Thompson Home. My grandfather had married into the family, and together with my grandmother, they had built up the company. My grandmother wanted my mother to help elevate the company alongside my father. Therefore, as my mother's brand grew, their relationship naturally deteriorated. After various issues, my parents decided to divorce. To simply say that marriage involves just two people would be an understatement. Thompson Home is too big a company, and my mother cherishes her own brand. They decided to divorce to prevent further strain on the family relationships that could affect the company's management. My mother took me with her when she left the house, but my grandmother allowed it. Perhaps she wanted my father to remarry and have a child who could be the heir. But my father never remarried despite her insistence. My mother felt the same. They continued to care for each other even after their separation. That's why my mother continued to use the Thompson name even after the divorce. And it was my surname before I married Andrew. Now that I'm divorced, I've returned to being a Thompson. Although relations with my mother were strained, my grandmother respected her character and skills, and she cared for me as her son's child. She was a very fair and generous person. But when it came to the wealth and company that had been passed down through generations, she couldn't accept my mother starting her own business. She wanted the entire family to be united and continue to protect Thompson Home. My father wanted me to work with them, too, if I didn't mind. So I joined the company under the condition that I would be just another employee. So, very few people know that I am the daughter of the president. My grandmother knew, but she never particularly mentioned it. I kept my personal life and business completely separate. But my father secretly told me that my grandmother was pleased. I was learning the real estate business. This time, my critical condition had something to do with my parents' divorce. And it seems to have made my grandmother think. And so, my grandmother came to my mother, apologizing for her stubbornness all these years. This led to my parents remarrying after 25 years apart. Such an intriguing story couldn't possibly go unnoticed by the media. My mother, who visited me in the hospital, told me about it. And I asked to join her in taking interviews. Of course, my grandmother was delighted to agree. Major newspapers, television, and magazines came to cover the story. And I was featured prominently as well. Naturally, I thought Andrew would notice. Indeed, he found out that I am the daughter of a wealthy landowner and the president of Thompson Home. His frantic, tearful phone call came when he realized what he had missed out on. I sued Andrew for forging the divorce papers. His lawyer sought a settlement, but I refused, and as a result, Andrew was prosecuted and found guilty with a suspended sentence. I also demanded compensation from Sarah, who knew about Andrew's forgery, and sued her as an accomplice. Her lawyer sought a settlement too, but I refused, and she received a lighter, but still suspended, sentence. It turned out that Sarah and Andrew met at the company's founding party. Sarah fell for Andrew at first sight, despite knowing he was married, and insisted on marrying him. Initially, Andrew was troubled by the fact that Sarah was 10 years his senior and not his type. But he couldn't refuse the president's daughter, and their relationship deepened over time. The president, unable to marry off his daughter Sarah, turned a blind eye. He thought if Andrew would take his daughter off his hands, a little money given to Andrew's wife would solve any problems. Andrew confessed that he initially mistreated me because he felt guilty for making me do nearly all the housework despite earning less. By speaking ill of Jenny, I wanted to feel justified in my actions. It made me happy to be pampered by her. I was being childish. Looking back, I regret acting like a child. Even if that were his true feelings, the fact that he deeply hurt me and pushed me to lose all hope is undeniable. Perhaps initially motivated by his neediness, Andrew, after meeting Sarah, might have thought he could divorce me if I fell ill. When I got sick, he hastily filed the forged divorce papers and married Sarah. thinking that creating a fait accompli would make me accept the situation without resistance. If his affair with Sarah came to light, he would be at fault in the divorce. He planned to make it seem like my fault, treating me like a servant at home, while stringing Sarah along until an opportunity arose. Andrew pleaded to his lawyer, "I never intended to leave Jenny." But Sarah was so persistent I couldn't break it off. The only person I truly love is Jenny. I was just waiting for Sarah to give up. But of course, that was not taken seriously. Sarah's father, furious, divorced her from Andrew. Subsequently, Andrew was dismissed from his job and now works live-in at a new company, toiling from early morning till late night to pay the compensation I was awarded. Sarah's father didn't demand compensation from Andrew, partly because Sarah was complicit, but also to prioritize the payments to me. Honestly, I didn't care about the money, but I wanted them to atone for their actions. That's why I refused any settlement offer from Sarah's father, no matter how much he pleaded. Sarah's father, saying he would no longer let her be free, came to apologize and asked me to settle things quietly. But understanding my firm stance, he finally accepted it. Sarah is now under strict family surveillance, being sternly re-educated from scratch. Sometimes, I can't help but think that if Sarah had not fallen for Andrew, none of this would have happened. However, considering she persistently pursued Andrew despite knowing he was married, her guilt is not insignificant. Andrew should have clearly maintained his marital fidelity and rejected Sarah's advances. But he did not. Dreaming of marrying a president's daughter and trapping his wife in that situation is an unforgivable crime. What happens to them now is no longer my concern, as long as they never appear before me again. My parents remarried, and as the heir and president's daughter, I've begun to study anew. While I have learned quite a bit about real estate as an employee, managing a business is different. I must study much more about business management. I stubbornly thought that I did not want to divorce like my parents, and that led to such a situation. It was due to my own weakness. If I had been more assertive and faced Andrew properly, perhaps I would not have ended up like this. Maybe we would still be a happy couple. It pains my heart to think about it because I truly loved him. He was someone I seriously loved and married. To have turned such a person into a criminal makes me feel as if I bear a heavy guilt. When I shared these thoughts, both my mother and grandmother told me I was wrong. You mustn't blame yourself. You didn't hurt anyone. That's very important. They committed those crimes entirely of their own volition. Your mother is right. If there is any guilt, it lies with me for not accepting your mother, for making you timid. Now reconciled and close, my mother and grandmother comforted me. Blaming myself was also blaming them, I realized. Humans. Era. What matters is what we do when we era. A lesson I've learned. Whether or not someone like Andrew, whom I can love again, comes along, I don't know. When that time comes, I will make sure not to repeat my mistakes. A life where I never love again because of one failure would be lonely. Even if I never meet such a person, I want to walk through life upright and confident on my own. I am just starting to take those steps. I have sworn to myself to live a happy life. Pay back everything, will you? Well, if you do that, you'll be a welfare beggar in the near future. Prepare yourself because I'll also demand compensation. I clenched my fist tightly. Yet, I managed to hold back my anger and said with a smile, "Got it." Indeed, such things need to be settled, right? Then, make sure you check the exact amount I've used, okay? After that, I gave him my address and hurried back home. Phil probably thought I had run away seeing me like that, but I wasn't running away. When Phil contacted me next, I was ready to end everything. That day came much sooner than expected, just 3 days after I saw Phil again. Right away, Phil started bombarding me with urgent calls. But even when I answered, Phil just kept repeating the same words over and over. It seemed that we couldn't resolve anything unless we met in person. So we met again, and there Phil exclaimed. "Why? How? Is this really your house?" The reason for his panic on the phone seemed to be my house. In front of my mansion, Phil truly seemed to have lost his mind. My name is Stacy Manning. Currently, I am a 40-year-old housewife. I met my husband Phil 6 years ago. Introduced by the president of the company I was working for at the time. The president loved to go fishing. One day, while fishing, it seems he met Phil, who had come with a friend by chance. Phil was not interested in fishing. So he apparently spent the time talking with the president, who was there alone. Knowing that he was single, the president thought of me. The reason was that I had lost my parents early and was all alone in the world. Feeling sorry for me, the president, who always looked after me, thought Phil and I could become a family. I couldn't refuse the president's kindness, and when we met, Phil somehow took a liking to me. Thus, we started dating and eventually got married. Now, I have quit my job and become a full-time housewife. Phil was a very kind person. My in-laws were wonderful, too, treating me just like their real daughter, and for me, who had lost my parents, they were like real parents. Phil's house was a duplex. The in-laws had built it new when they got married, and after Phil's grandparents passed away. One half of the duplex became vacant, so Phil and I moved in there. Although we lived separately, we often saw my in-laws and had a good relationship with them. However, there was one discomfort I couldn't quite get rid of regarding the relationship between Phil and my in-laws. Apparently, Phil's father had become ill a few years ago and was living in a wheelchair. Phil seemed not to care about his father at all. For example, the day we first met face to face. When we arrived at the designated restaurant, a man in a wheelchair couldn't get over a step and was struggling. I helped him over that step. Later, I learned that the man was Phil's father. At that time, my mother-in-law had told Phil to stay with his father and went to the restroom. Despite that, Phil had left his father alone and gone to the restroom as well. "Phil, I told you to stay with your dad. Where were you?" Mother-in-law said, but there was no sign of remorse in Phil. I felt a moment of discomfort, but Phil praised me, saying, "Indeed, Stacy is a wonderful woman. Even though she didn't know he was my father, she helped him." I momentarily forgot the discomfort I felt. Looking back now, there were many such incidents. After all, I wasn't informed beforehand that Phil's father was wheelchair-bound. Nor did I question why a restaurant with many steps was chosen. Recently, while dining with 4 people, Phil suddenly suggested, "Why don't we try mountain climbing?" I was taken aback. In any case, Phil showed no consideration for his father. "Phil, isn't it thoughtless to suggest such a thing when your father can barely walk?" I told Phil that the night he suggested the mountain climb. However, he just laughed. "Dad can't make it. I know that. He just doesn't have to come. Even if he doesn't come, it's too much to leave him alone. It's cruel to suggest a trip he can't even take. Then, Stacy, you can stay and keep him company." I was dumbfounded by his words. No matter what I argued, Phil never seemed to listen. Each time Phil spoke, I continued to feel guilty towards his father. However, the story didn't end there. One day, forgetting such a conversation, Phil suddenly said he was going on a trip just with his mother. "Since Stacy is here, Dad will be fine, right?" Leaving those words behind, he really went away with his mother. My mother-in-law thought I had agreed, saying, "Stacy, call me if anything happens. Thank you for this time." She smiled happily, so I couldn't say anything. After silently seeing them off, I apologized to Phil's father for his son's selfish actions. "Thank you for always caring. It's my fault for getting sick. So you don't have to worry, Stacy." Father-in-law said so with a smile. That smile somewhat comforted me, but I still felt uneasy as I awaited Phil's return. After that, whether it was lunch or dinner, Phil planned numerous trips, always going out just with his mother. But I always feel bad for Stacy. Mother-in-law would say so, but Phil responded kindly. "Normally, Mom takes care of him, right? It's fine once in a while." Stacy says so, too. I certainly don't recall saying such things, but I cannot deny them either. Every time the two of them went out, I was left to take care of my father-in-law and keep him company. I felt sorry for my father-in-law, and it seemed he felt sorry for me as well. Then, 2 years later, my father-in-law finally passed away. At the funeral, engulfed in sorrow, I heard Phil's unbelievable remark. "Finally freed. An old man in a wheelchair is nothing but a burden." Well, but someone appeared to take that burden, so it was good I didn't have to do anything. It seems like Mom was saved thanks to him, better him than no one. I trembled with anger. Such a kind father-in-law is called a burden? And someone to bear that burden? It was the moment I finally understood what Phil really thought of me. He must have enjoyed the trips with his beloved mother. He ignored the feelings of my father-in-law and me during those times. Even though I wanted children, Phil had said, I still want it to be just the two of us. But we hardly had any time just the two of us. It must have been an excuse, thinking that if I got pregnant and gave birth, I wouldn't be able to take care of him. I was so frustrated and ashamed that I cried quietly by myself, but this was a funeral. I was grateful that everyone left me alone as I cried. Of course, my mother-in-law probably didn't mean that. At the funeral, my mother-in-law's sad face didn't seem like an act. I understood that she was happy being invited by Phil, and she always brought me souvenirs. Of course, my mother-in-law needed to reflect on her actions too. But it seemed she also had regrets since my father-in-law had passed away. But, if Phil had thought it through more, he wouldn't have dragged my mother-in-law into such a whirlpool of regret. The more I thought of him as the root cause of everything, the more unforgivable it seemed. Since that incident, we became a couple only by name. We talked in front of my mother-in-law to avoid worrying her. But when it was just the two of us, we were like air to each other. Eventually, I didn't even care whether Phil was at home or not. Presumably, he was out with my mother-in-law, and now that my father-in-law was gone, I had no right to say anything. However, one day, Phil was not at home, but my mother-in-law was. Huh? Mother, you're not with Phil today? At those words, my mother-in-law tilted her head. What do you mean? Since your father passed away, I haven't gone out with him. I've made it clear to refuse. Huh? I told him to treasure you more than me. Phil agreed and said he would take good care of his wife. I was shocked at those words. Taking care of his wife? He didn't even talk to me, yet he said such things to please my mother-in-law. I said, I'm sorry to say this, but there's no love between us anymore. Taking care of his wife is out of the question. I can't imagine Phil taking care of his wife. That's so. My mother-in-law seemed genuinely shocked by this revelation. But I couldn't stand it anymore. Even pretending to be a happy couple was painful. But then, where is Phil going? He's hardly ever home anymore, day or night. Indeed. I thought he was always out with you. We looked at each other. Now that we realized we both thought he was with the other, where was Phil really going? That day, I confronted Phil when he returned home late. You're late. Where have you been until this time? Phil stopped dead when I spoke to him. He hadn't expected me to say anything when it was just the two of us. I was out dining with Mom. Phil mumbled his answer, obviously a big lie. If he was with his mother, I wouldn't have said anything. Knowing this, he must have used that excuse. But not today. If it was with your mother, she was actually at home. Which mother did you dine with? What's with that tone? It sounds so sarcastic. Sarcastic? You're the one who lied, what do you think? I retorted to Phil. Phil sighed heavily and then said to me, does it matter where? I deserve a break once in a while. A break? You hardly come home after work, and on your days off, you're always out. You pushed the care of your father onto me even when he was alive. I snapped, raising my voice. Phil seemed to have something on his mind in response to my words. But since it was true, he couldn't retort. Desperate, Phil also raised his voice.
Ah.
Shut up, you nag. Mom likes you, so even though you were no longer needed, I kept you here. If you have so many complaints, just leave. Such terrible words. But I desperately controlled my anger. Thinking I had nothing to say, Phil said triumphantly. You'd be in trouble, right? Where would a housewife with no relatives go if I threw you out, huh? But you defied me. I have no reason to support you anymore. As the insults continued, my heart nearly broke. I didn't regret complaining to Phil. I didn't expect him to understand. But he had no right to say these things. If you're leaving, that's perfect. There's another woman who wants to marry me. I wouldn't be troubled if a woman like you disappeared. What? Are you saying you've been cheating? I, who had been silent, returned words at that. Cheating? Don't accuse me of anything I haven't done. But you just said there's a woman who wants to marry you.
Yeah.
I'm serious. It's a good opportunity for you to leave and for me to remarry. And so, we ended up getting divorced. Only my mother-in-law kept crying and apologizing, which made my eyes well up too. From meeting at 35 to divorcing at 40, I think I truly wasted some precious years. But from here on, I think of it as a new life and I'm determined to do my best. About a year after the divorce, I finally got used to my new life and regained a peaceful existence. The president of my previous company, knowing my situation, rehired me. And work was going well. One day, on my way home from work, I stopped at the supermarket. I was tired and reached for half-priced food. Then, I spotted my favorite cheesecake in the discount section and stopped. Just as a familiar voice reached my ears. I thought it was some disgraceful old hag. I looked up at the voice. There was Phil, brazenly peering into my basket and laughing. Lonely, huh? A discounted food, really? It's none of your business. As I grabbed the cheesecake and tried to leave, Phil said. Oh, right. You used Dad's savings, didn't you? Your father's savings? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie. You were buying stuff like diapers when you were taking care of him, right? I was surprised by his words. Of course. Besides, I had permission from his parents for that. They had asked me to buy those things, so there was no reason for Phil to say such things now. That was. I tried to respond, but Phil smirked triumphantly. Pay back everything, will you? Well, if you do that, you'll be a welfare beggar in the near future. Prepare yourself because I'll also demand compensation. I clenched my fist tightly. Yet, I managed to hold back my anger and said with a smile, "Got it. Indeed, such things need to be settled, right? Then, make sure you check the exact amount I've used, okay?" Putting on a brave face. Phil laughed, but I didn't rise to his provocation, and quickly took out a memo from my bag to write down my address. "Also, I live here now. We need to have a discussion, so please contact me later." I quickly finished speaking, handed over the address, and hurried home. Phil probably thought I had run away seeing me like that, but I wasn't running away. The next time Phil contacted me, I was ready to end everything. I had made up my mind. It happened just 3 days after our reunion. I was at work. Suddenly, I noticed that Phil had been calling me repeatedly. I wondered if something had happened. Just then, another call came in. I hurriedly answered, thinking something might have happened to my mother-in-law. "Hello? What's going on?" Over the phone, Phil shouted. "What is this?" "What? I'm outside your house right now. What the hell is going on?" I didn't understand what he meant. But Phil was muttering something, almost in a frenzy. Had he gone mad? Though I felt his madness, I asked calmly again. "You're in front of my house?" "I'm sorry, but I'm at work." "Are you talking about the discussion?" "I don't care about the discussion." "What do you mean by all this?" We were completely at odds. I sighed deeply. It seemed that nothing had happened to my mother-in-law, at least. "We can't resolve this over the phone, let's meet and talk. I'll be home in 3 hours." I said this while checking my watch and hung up. Phil called a few more times, but I ignored all his calls. When I hurried home after work and approached my house, I saw Phil waiting there. "Have you been here all this time?" Noticing me, Phil approached with a furious expression and raised his voice. "What does this mean? What about?" "You need to specify." Hearing my words, Phil pointed at my house and opened his mouth again. "Why? How? Can you live in such a magnificent house?" Phil said this, spitting as he emphasized his words. I recoiled involuntarily. "Did you run off with Dad's inheritance?" "What are you talking about?" "Of course not." Phil attacked me fiercely, but I brushed it off lightly. "It's my parents' money." However, he was not convinced. "Your parents? Weren't they long gone? Were you lying?" "Calm down a bit. Okay? This is the house built with the real estate income inherited from my parents. It's impossible that I stole any money from your parents." Finally, it seemed Phil understood a bit and regained some composure. "Yes. It's true that my parents passed away early. However, they came from a family that owned a lot of real estate. And after their deaths, being an only child, I inherited all of it. The income from these properties is a staggering $3 million per year. Money keeps flowing and even without me doing anything. And my total assets amount to several tens of millions dollars. Of course, I could live comfortably without working. But what I really wanted was something money can't buy: human warmth. The reason I worked was more for the warmth of eating lunch with colleagues or supporting each other through mistakes than for the income. Being completely alone, if I had distanced myself from society just because I had money, I would have truly been alone. When I was married and a housewife, I felt the warm love of my in-laws and was happy. Because of the divorce, I returned to work to maintain my social connections. I explained this to Phil and then added, "But if I say I have money, everyone comes flocking for it." I was really happy when Phil liked me without knowing I was so wealthy. Well, probably because I was a caregiver. That is. After hearing my story, Phil regained his composure. At the same time, it seemed he regretted having driven me away. He tried to appear calm, but his face was pale, and his voice trembled. But it wasn't what anyone would do. I thought you looked kind, so I felt I could leave my father in her care confidently. He muttered some plausible excuse and nodded as if to convince himself. By the way, if you had so much money, you should have told me. Why? What difference would it make if I told you, Phil? Well, that is, like managing it. Phil seemed desperate to get involved with the wealth, but it was too late. I smiled slightly and said, if we had had a child, they would have been the ones to inherit it. Too bad, huh? Phil seemed to feel even more regret at my words, but still had no response. I continued, almost like delivering the final blow. It's late today, can we possibly discuss this another time? Was it about settling the caregiving expenses during our marriage? Oh.
Yeah.
That's right, we need to settle that properly. Tormented by regret, Phil seemed to find some hope in my words and briskly looked up. However, the next moment, he would be plunged back into despair. That's great. I paid quite a bit for your father's hospital fees. If I can get reimbursed, that would really help me. What? Phil froze for a moment, turning even paler. Watching his reaction, I rapidly continued. I had covered the hospital fees, right? It was about $10,200 over 3 years. Well, it was my own decision, so let's say just $10,000 is fine. And then, was it about the diapers from your father's savings that I used on my own? I think it was about $1,000, right? So, subtract that, and you just pay me $9,000. I could hardly suppress a laugh as Phil found himself unable to say anything. During the caregiving, my in-laws had said, we feel bad that you're paying for hospital fees, we should at least cover something. I never intended to make my in-laws pay. But I thought it would make my father-in-law feel even more indebted if I covered everything. That's why I had them break into the savings just for the diaper expenses. And even then, it wasn't always for diapers. If assisted, my father-in-law could go to the bathroom. It wasn't a huge amount spent on diapers, but Phil's nitpicking brought about this situation. And about compensation? I'm not sure what compensation you're talking about, but if anyone should receive it, wouldn't it be me, the one who was cheated on? With those words sounding like a final blow, Phil collapsed on the spot. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Then he groveled on the ground, but such an act was meaningless. If you have something to say, we can hear it at the next meeting. I left these words behind, leaving Phil groveling as I returned alone to my large mansion. A few days later, I contacted a lawyer. I doubted he would bother me again. But just to be sure, I wanted to sever all ties with Phil completely. The lawyer listened to my story and acted immediately. When I visited Phil's house for the first time in a year, a young woman came out. May I help you? Is Phil here? I'm his ex-wife. After hearing this, she looked at me with discomfort and went back inside. In her place, Phil came out. Good, you're here. I've called many times without response. So I decided to come directly to your house for a discussion, just like you did. As I said this, Phil began to fumble. So, I apologized, didn't I? What value does your apology have? You contacted me to settle up, right? It might be awkward to be overheard by the neighbors, so I'll come in. Conceding, Phil stepped aside to let me into the house. However, I was shocked by the state of the house I entered for the first time in a year. What is this? The hallway looked as if it hadn't been cleaned in days, with visible footprints in the dust. Used cardboard boxes were left abandoned in the already narrow corridor. Cautiously, I peeked into the living room where the young woman I saw earlier was sprawled on the sofa, absorbed in her smartphone, surrounded by scattered laundry. Phil, trying to prevent me from seeing the state of the living room, hurriedly closed the door. Since Claire is here, I guess this place will do. It appears that the woman from earlier was indeed Claire, Phil's new wife. Phil led me to the entrance and suggested we talk there. I sighed at his words. Given the state of things, it couldn't be helped. What's with all this mess, anyway? I couldn't help but voice my concern. Phil gave a forced laugh and said, "Well, I just haven't gotten around to cleaning." But it looked more like he never cleaned at all. I had many thoughts but decided not to delve too deeply. Getting involved was the last thing I wanted. Later, the lawyer graciously compiled the details we had discussed into documents. I was seeking a settlement of $9,000 I had spent, and $20,000 in compensation for being driven out due to the affair, totaling $29,000. Like before, Phil turned pale and begged for mercy on his knees. "There's no way I can forgive you," I retorted. As we were exchanging words, Claire appeared from the living room. "What's all the commotion?" What does the ex-wife want?" It was getting complicated. I thought so, but if I was to receive compensation, she was not unrelated. The lawyer explained on my behalf. Claire listened silently to the lawyer's explanation. But after everything was explained, she exclaimed loudly, "Huh?" I wondered if the two of them would start making a fuss. But instead, Claire turned to Phil and raised her voice. "You're 41 and still such a pathetic man. You've caused trouble, so you should pay up." "But..." "No buts." Claire spoke quite reasonably, which surprised me. "I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience. I wouldn't have caused such a problem if I had known he was married." Then, she apologized. The lawyer and I exchanged glances, wondering what was happening. You didn't know Mr. Phil was married?" "Of course not." I was deceived. It turns out Phil had been deceiving Claire, who was only 20, telling her he was 35. Claire said that when she first came to this house after I had left, she felt suspicious because there were women's items around. However, she was misled at that time, being told they belonged to his mother. But a few months ago, she had a conversation with a neighbor and finally learned she was the second wife. Unable to bear the deceit, she asked for a divorce. But Phil wouldn't accept it, and she had been neglecting household duties since. "It's my fault for being deceived." Claire said this while glaring at Phil, who just smirked. Despite her youth, I couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. "Can't we do something for her?" "I'll pay if it's about money," I asked the lawyer. "What?" "It's none of your business." "What are you saying?" Phil, who had been smirking, suddenly began to panic. "It is my business. I lost 5 years from age 35 to 40. Do you understand how precious those years were to me, someone without children? She's still young. I don't want her to go through what I did." My passion seemed to widen Claire's eyes slightly. Perhaps her stern look was because she had already despaired of life. "Understood. It's up to Ms. Claire now," the lawyer said, turning to her. Then, with a strained voice, she murmured, "I want a divorce." Phil collapsed in despair at Claire's words. He had claimed to be serious about her. If that were truly the case, he should have been honest with her. He was probably only thinking about driving me out and marrying her. Such self-centered behavior was typical of Phil. "Is someone here?" Just as things were about to be settled, a figure emerged from the back of the house. "Mother." Stacy. The mother-in-law appeared much thinner and frail, barely a year since I last saw her. And she came staggering over to me. Then she sat down in front of me. Phil really did something terrible. I owe you more gratitude than I can ever express. She murmured the same words she had a year ago and cried. I felt my eyes well up too, but held back and asked her. More importantly, are you okay? You seem much thinner. Yes. I've been out of money. I haven't been able to eat well lately. What? My bank book disappeared about a month ago, and I hardly have any money left. I glared at Phil. He started panicking at my gaze. From his reaction, it was clear he was involved in this. What is going on? At my loud voice, Phil flinched. I see. Now it was all becoming clear. Phil must have rummaged through his mother's bank book and, finding less balance than he expected, assumed I had used the money. That's why he demanded compensation when we met by chance. Never mind. I don't intend to listen to any excuses. No matter what Phil says, it will not quell my anger. Mary, would you like to live with me? Huh? Hey, what are you saying? I ignored Phil and continued speaking to the mother-in-law. If so, why not consider adopting her as your child? The lawyer immediately offered his advice. I was very open to the idea. Tears welled up in the mother-in-law's eyes as she asked me again, is that really okay? Of course. I responded with a smile. Hey, Mom. Don't be deceived by her. You have a son, remember? But Phil was desperate not to lose his mother. The mother-in-law said, Phil is a precious son to me. But Stacy, you were like a daughter to me too. I still can't forgive you for driving her out. Tears streaming down her face, the mother-in-law slowly stood up. Let me just grab my things. And then she slowly disappeared back into the house. Leaving Phil in a daze at the entrance, the lawyer, the mother-in-law, Claire, and I all left the house together. Please watch your step, Mother. As I said this and took her hand, Phil seemed unable to respond. He probably never even bothered to show such consideration. After Claire left him, I received a call from the lawyer that the divorce had been finalized. Apparently, Phil had also been asked to pay compensation. He wanted to use that compensation to pay for my legal fees, but I refused. Claire is still young, and having money won't hurt her. I believe she will use it well for herself. In addition to paying me compensation, Phil had to pay Claire as well. The total compensation to both of us was too high for Phil's salary, and he couldn't even get a loan. Therefore, he took a loan only for Claire's compensation. And I agreed to accept mine in installments. I planned to give it all to my mother-in-law. Phil would now live a lonely life, chasing payments. Having always been self-centered, struggling just to make ends meet might be good for him. Later, I discussed it again with the mother-in-law and completed the adoption process. It's unlikely that Phil, now penniless, would come to take the mother-in-law back. But it seemed better to be prepared in case something happened. After moving in with me, the mother-in-law started regaining her vigor. Resembling more of the mother-in-law I knew. Her smiles returned, and I felt truly glad. I'm so glad I met you, Stacy. Hearing this from the mother-in-law made me slightly resentful that it was thanks to Phil. But I want to do my filial duty to her, something I couldn't do for my own parents. Having gone through this experience, I decided to use most of my assets to support children who are also orphans like me. And young people who are despairing about life. Helping others isn't anything grand, but I firmly believe that as long as you keep living, there will come a day when you can laugh again. I want to share the happiness I've felt, and that's what inspired this decision.
Do you really think I've fallen seriously in love with you? What? I was not loved by Matt. The realization made my head spin. Matt added insult to injury by yelling at me. I just wanted a wife who would take care of the housework because I'm busy with work every day. And yet, you had to go and get sick and be hospitalized. I want a divorce from a sick old hag. I felt like everything was going dark before my eyes, but then I remembered something I had seen earlier. If I have that, there is nothing to be afraid of. Thinking this, I regained my composure and retorted to Matt. Fine. I have something strong on my side. So, I don't mind letting go of someone like Matt. However, after all he put me through, and then getting back with his ex while I was hospitalized, I decided to give him a piece of my mind. I am Kim, a 45-year-old housewife who recently got married. I had led a simple life of going back and forth between home and work until I was in my mid-40s. My only pleasure was going out for drinks or shopping. And every year, as I hoped for happiness, buying a lottery ticket as a test of my luck became a tradition. One day, I came across a dating app for people in their 40s. I had been to matchmaking parties before but never had good encounters. So, I started with a light heart, never dreaming that it would lead me to meet my current husband. He is 3 years older than me, named Matt Irving. He is a manager in a large corporation with over 1,000 employees, and his annual income is about $100,000. He looked serious and hardworking. Curious why such a good man had not married yet, I casually asked him when we first met. He responded with a shy smile. Well, I've been so busy with work that I never had a chance to meet someone. Indeed, managing many employees as a department head must be overwhelming. Yet, Matt started using the dating app because he felt lonely at this age. His bashful response made him look all the more radiant. From that moment, I might have started to fall for Matt. He seemed to like me too, as he said this. Honestly, I never thought I'd actually find someone on an app, but I'm glad to have met a woman like you, Kim. No, I thought I was too old to meet anyone and was about to give up. I never expected to meet someone as wonderful as you on this app. We both thought it was a miraculous encounter and smiled at each other. It didn't take long for us to consider marriage. Then, after meeting for 6 months, we got married. The day before registering our marriage, I thought, is this the last time? And bought a lottery ticket, my last as a single person. Right after our wedding, Matt made a request. I'm busy with work, so sharing household chores as a working couple is a bit much. So, Kim, I'd like you to quit your job and stay at home. What? Well, my mother was a housewife too, so I don't mind dedicating myself to housework. I agreed to his request and quit my job as we started our married life. Matt happily ate my home cooking, saying it was delicious. The days I had spent eating alone seemed like a lie, filled with joy. However, I never thought that happiness would be so short-lived. Less than a month into our marriage, Matt's attitude changed dramatically. At first, even if he was late due to overtime, he would come straight home after work. But lately, it's not uncommon for him to come home in the middle of the night. Even if I prepare dinner and wait for him, he says, I've already eaten, so I don't need it. If only he had told me earlier. I held back my hurt feelings and cleaned up the meal I had prepared. Even on the rare occasions he ate at home, he would look at the meal skeptically and complain. Yuck. Tired from work, and you serve me boiled fish, which I hate. How can I eat such plain food? Make something with meat. What? But there's no meat today. I'll make a meat dish tomorrow. So please bear with this for today. If there's none, go buy some. I want to eat meat, so make it now. Despite it being past 9 p.m., he sent me out to buy meat just before the supermarket closed. His arrogant attitude wasn't limited to meals. Even if I cleaned meticulously, he would always find fault. Tall Matt would trace his finger over high places like the top of large cabinets and yell, Here! There's still dust left here. I'm short, and he would point out places I couldn't reach without a stool, as if to torment me. I can't reach such high places often. I'll clean there during the big cleaning, so don't point it out on normal days. Even if I said that, Matt would reply with a look of disdain. Ha! You're leaving the high places dusty until the big clean? Shorties really are useless, huh? It hurt me to be demeaned for my height, but I didn't know what he might say if I talked back. So I had no choice but to endure whatever he said. Taking advantage of this, Matt would complain about everything I did around the house. He would always laze around, saying he was tired. At first, I thought he was a kind man, but day by day, that facade began to peel away. However, I kept telling myself that this was what marriage was like since I had finally gotten married at this age. But lately, I've felt my heart racing and a strange pain in my chest. What's happening? Well, I think it'll go away soon. I was concerned about the discomfort in my chest, but I ignored it for a while. That might have been a mistake. My condition gradually worsened, and I started experiencing severe breathlessness and dizziness. Unable to bear it any longer, I decided to go to the hospital for an examination. These symptoms were from heart disease caused by stress. The mental stress that assaulted me daily had inflicted significant damage on my body. I had to be hospitalized for a while. When I went home to prepare for my hospitalization, I told Matt about it, but far from being concerned, Matt frowned and said, "What? A long-term hospitalization? Seriously? What about the house during that time? Who's going to do the housework? I'm sorry for the inconvenience. During my hospital stay, please manage with takeout or ready meals. We have a dryer for laundry, and I don't think it will get too dirty if you're alone. Hey. Are you saying I have to do all the housework? That's impossible because I'm busy. I'm sorry. It's just until I'm discharged." I apologized profusely, but Matt remained in a foul mood. "Really, you're only half useful around the house, and now you're talking about hospitalization? You're really useless. Remember this when you get discharged." As Matt hurled insults at me, I began preparing for my hospital stay alone. I even felt guilty, as if I was running away from the situation, though it wasn't my fault. The next morning, Matt was still in a bad mood and left for work without seeing me off to the hospital. Reluctantly, I headed to the hospital alone with my belongings. Even after I was hospitalized, Matt never visited me once. I had expected this, so I had brought all my necessities, including clothes. However, the hospital room was very lonely with no visitors. To distract myself from the boredom, I surfed the internet on my smartphone every day. Then, a strange message popped up in my messaging app notifications. It was from Matt, but the content left me dumbfounded. "Rachel, I love you. I'll be off work soon, so wait for me." I was about to mark the message as read when it suddenly displayed the message has been deleted. Who is Rachel? And why such a gentle message that he has never sent to me? Maybe Matt is cheating on me. As this anxious thought crossed my mind, my chest began to tighten with pain. I hurriedly pressed the nurse call button. Fortunately, it was a minor attack, and the pain subsided in about 5 minutes after following the nurse's instructions. The nurse advised me, "Stress is not good for you, try to think of something fun." But I had no idea what to think about. At that moment, I remembered the lottery ticket I bought before my marriage registration. I believe the results were announced yesterday. As a distraction, I checked the lottery numbers on the official website via my smartphone. I was shocked to see the words "Congratulations on your win" displayed on my page. No, can it be? While I was excitedly counting the zeros in the amount I had won, the door to my hospital room suddenly opened, and Matt walked in. Behind him was a woman in her early 30s, unfamiliar and rather flashy. "Hey. Feeling well?" Matt addressed me with a casual tone. "How can I be well? I'm hospitalized. Besides, you haven't even shown your face once until now." "Of course. Who do you think has been busy because of whom?" Work and housework, it's been tough over here. As usual, Matt was only concerned about his own hardships, indifferent to my condition. With a puzzled expression, I retorted. Oh really? Sorry for the inconvenience. Despite my disgruntled response, Matt was unfazed and grinned back at me. Kim, you really lack charm. Well, it's okay. From now on, you won't have to worry about being inconvenienced. Take your time in the hospital. What do you mean by that? Matt's meaningful words made me uneasy again. Then, Matt wrapped his arm around the woman's shoulder and said proudly. Now, she'll be taking care of things around me. Right, Rachel? Rachel was the name written in the earlier message. She smiled warmly, standing close to Matt. Who is this woman? Surprised, huh? Since you were useless, I contacted my ex, Rachel. She still loves me and came running back. Matt boasted proudly. I tried to stay calm and asked. Oh, an old acquaintance came to help, did she? Sorry for the trouble. I need to stay in the hospital a bit longer. As I spoke, the two of them burst out laughing. This wife of yours is a bit funny, isn't she? She doesn't understand anything, does she? Well, can't be helped, huh? After all, you hadn't been in a relationship until your mid-40s. Matt and Rachel looked at me as if mocking. I knew, of course, they were having an affair. I wanted to say that, but arguing would only increase the strain on my heart. So I remained calm intentionally, but Matt then said something outrageous. Anyway, I don't need a frail, old woman anymore. I'll be with Rachel from now on. While saying this, Matt held out a piece of paper with green writing on it. It meant he wanted a divorce. I managed to keep my composure, but I couldn't hide my agitation. Why? If she's an ex, you broke up once, right? You got together with me after that, and now you want to go back to her. When I asked, Matt responded with a look of exasperation. Do you really think I've fallen seriously in love with you? What? I was not loved by Matt. The realization made my head spin. Matt added insult to injury by yelling at me. That's why. I just wanted a wife who would take care of the housework because I'm busy with work every day. And yet, you had to go and get sick and be hospitalized. I want a divorce from a sick old hag. I felt like everything was going dark before my eyes, but then I remembered something I had seen earlier. If I have that, there is nothing to be afraid of. Thinking this, I regained my composure and retorted to Matt. Fine. Surprised by my unexpected reaction, Matt's eyes widened. What? Are you serious? You have nowhere to go if I leave you, don't act tough. I'm not trying to act tough. Besides, make sure to submit this divorce form properly, okay? I signed the divorce form handed to me and returned it to Matt. All right. I'll take care of it. I'll submit it tomorrow. Despite saying that, Matt still looked puzzled. Rachel looked down on me with disdain, a smug smile playing on her lips. I guess you've come to terms with your struggle to make a living, no match for my youth and beauty. Right? I'm proud too. I can have Rachel, who was the #1 girl at the nightclub, all to myself. Even when we were dating, I resigned myself to the fact that an older guy like me could be dumped any time. No matter how popular I was at that nightclub, I've always been devoted to Matt only. Let's submit our marriage registration as soon as the divorce form is out. Nightclub? #1. Hearing my reaction, Matt quickly covered his mouth. If I thought he was working hard and earnestly, he had been frequenting that kind of place. Come to think of it, even after we got married, there were days he came home drunk, claiming he had been working overtime. The times he came home late saying, "I've already eaten," also seemed suspicious now. Seeing the suspicion on my face, Rachel spoke up. Whatever, right? Anyway, Matt and I are getting together. You're no longer needed, old hag. As soon as Rachel said this, she grabbed Matt's arm tightly and left the scene. While I was enduring a difficult hospital stay, Matt had decided to remarry his affair partner. I just couldn't forgive Matt for that. Even if we parted, I would only feel relieved, but before that, I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. I started planning my revenge on Matt. Afterward, I rested in my hospital room, recovered steadily, and finally got permission to be discharged. Since Matt had remarried and moved to an apartment with Rachel, I would live alone in our former home after discharge. Upon returning home, I immediately headed to the designated bank to cash the winning lottery ticket. Considering the amount, it would take about a week to receive it. During that time, I searched online for a good lawyer. I wanted to investigate Matt's past relationships with women. Was his relationship with Rachel truly over before we married? If they had continued their relationship all along, I could claim compensation. When the lottery money was safely cashed, I found a lawyer and requested an investigation. As it turned out, Matt had indeed continued his relationship with Rachel all along. Rachel used to be a nightclub worker, and as Matt had said, she was indeed the most popular girl at the nightclub. They had started seeing each other from those days and never really broke up. So, Matt had continued his relationship with her while marrying me essentially as a housekeeper. Thinking about it made my blood boil. However, to prevent worsening my condition, I needed to stay calm. While I was healthy enough, I wanted to confront Matt and demand compensation right away. I decided to leave everything to my lawyer and wait for the right time. After a while, Matt called me. Hey. Why did a lawyer suddenly show up demanding compensation for infidelity? What's this all about? Well, do as the lawyer says. I'm fine with taking this to court if you don't pay up quickly. Shut up. First of all, where did you get the money to hire a lawyer? Court costs money, too. The hospital bills must have been no small amount either. Unaware of my finances, Matt tried to use that against me. But his careless words would prove to be his undoing. Right. Even though I was hospitalized during our marriage, you didn't contribute to the costs. I talked to the lawyer, and I heard I can claim those expenses from you too. Thanks to Matt's careless words, I could proceed with an advantage. Seeming to realize his mistake, Matt had nothing to counter with. From the other end of the phone, a woman's voice saying, "Let me talk to her," could be heard. Probably Rachel was listening in on the call. Wait. Do you even have the right to claim compensation? You broke down your own body and neglected your husband. I took care of him instead, so if anyone should pay compensation, it should be you. Yes. That's right. With the support of Rachel, Matt spoke confidently. But I calmly countered. Oh. Didn't your lawyer tell you? The investigation confirmed that Matt continued his relationship with Rachel even after our marriage. I hired a competent lawyer, so there's no escaping it. Stop bluffing. I've been saying you couldn't possibly have the money. There's that too. Despite your high income, you only gave me $1,700 a month for living expenses. Managing rent, utilities, and groceries with just that was tough. Maybe even that qualifies for compensation, don't you think? Indeed, Matt's treatment of me was always terrible. So whatever he said back, it just dug him deeper into a hole. If this goes to court, it will clearly be in my favor. Keeping a meticulous household budget app would also serve as evidence. Unaware of all this, Matt still thought I was just bluffing. A competent lawyer, really? That lawyer of yours can't be that great. Anyway, I won't be deceived. When Matt said that, I sent him the website of the law firm I found online via message. I hired this law firm. You have their business card, right? The homepage also features a photo of the lawyer who is currently assisting me. Seeing that page, Matt is probably shocked. Isn't this a pretty famous law firm? Really, where did you get the money to hire a lawyer from such a place? Matt asked in a flustered voice, so it might be about time to reveal the truth. Actually, I won $5 million in the lottery this year, including the surrounding prizes. What? My statement seems to have surprised Matt and Rachel. No way. I didn't even know you bought a lottery ticket. I bought it with the money I earned before we got married. So, I don't have to report every little thing to you, do I? After my response, there was a silence for a while. Then, in a panicked voice, Matt said, "You're at home right now, right? Wait for me, I'm coming over." What could Matt possibly want to do now? As I thought about it, about 20 minutes later, Matt arrived at my house alone. Surprisingly, Matt had a cheerful expression. "Kim. I came to talk about the division of property." "Huh? Division of property?" Matt looked pleased, which made me wonder what he was thinking. He's such a ridiculous man, I was speechless. "Yeah. You bought the lottery ticket before we got married, but you cashed it after we got married, right? Then, I might have the right to receive half of it as shared marital property?" Unfortunately, that's not possible. The cashing happened after the divorce was finalized, and above all, the reason for the divorce was your infidelity. Hey, don't say that. We were once married, so at least give me a quarter. Matt said this while pleading with his hands together. I sharply rebuked Matt, who always sought convenient solutions. No way. Not only is there no division of property, but I also need to receive compensation from you. About that. Matt was desperately trying to think of something convenient for him again. Listen. I was actually deceived by that woman. She was dazzled by my job and only came close because of it. She works in the nightlife industry, so she has many other clients, and I think, other men she's dating. So? What are you trying to say? I mean, I'm a victim of deception, not infidelity. Of course, I'll break up with her and never cheat again. So, won't you start over with me? I was amazed at how he could string together such excuses. Do you really think that kind of reasoning will work? There's no mistake you cheated. Look, I have plenty of evidence right here. I said this and scattered the photos of Matt's infidelity, collected by the lawyer, across the desk. The photos showed Matt with his arm around Rachel entering and exiting a hotel, and other scenes that clearly suggested adult relationships in the corner of a park. All of them were solid proof of infidelity. Damn it. Collecting stuff like this. Matt said this with a frustrated face as he picked up the photos. Then, Rachel appeared, as if to add insult to injury. Apparently, she had followed Matt, but it seems she was hiding nearby to see what was happening. Wait, Matt. Who do you think deceived you? It was you who came crying to me. Gah. Rachel, were you listening? Matt was definitely at his wits' end. Rachel, having heard all of Matt's self-serving arguments, looked furious. Don't look down on me because I was a nightclub worker. I still loved you even after we broke up, so what are you going to do about these feelings? I mean, I'm sorry. Surrounded by two women, Matt was completely diminished. I was really happy when Matt relied on me. You trampled on my feelings, so I'll be claiming compensation from you. Hey. Why should I pay compensation even to the person I cheated with? Person you cheated with? We were legally married, even if it was just for less than a month. Well, it started from infidelity, so, Seeing Matt's distressed expression, I almost burst out laughing. Matt. A woman's heart isn't that sweet. With my words, Matt seemed completely disheartened. It looked like everything was settling down, so I decided to call one more person who had been listening to the conversation from the shadows. You can come out now. What? Is there still someone else here? At my call, a person who had been waiting in the next room came in. Hello. I've heard everything. You're the lawyer from that time. Yes, this lawyer had told me to contact him anytime if anything happened. So when Matt said he was coming to my house, I immediately contacted him. The lawyer had quietly entered the house through the back door and had been waiting in the next room. Mr. Irving. As Mrs. Irving told you earlier, you certainly have no right to any division of property. Regarding the compensation, we will also reconsider it, as Rachel's issue has been added. Hearing this from the lawyer, Matt stood gaping in a daze. With this, everything was resolved, and I sighed in relief. Afterwards, I received compensation from Matt, and we settled the property division by splitting his income during our marriage. Matt divorced Rachel as well, and it seems he is now living alone. However, the company where Matt worked is a major corporation with strict rules. His infidelity and successive divorces apparently became known to the company, and Matt was fired. Originally being flashy with women, it seems he was already on his supervisor's radar. Thus, the news of his latest divorce scandal leaked quickly. I haven't met Matt since then, but someone informed me about it. It was none other than Rachel, the woman he cheated with. Rachel seemed to have reflected on her wrongdoings and came to my house to apologize. I'm sorry. I will pay the compensation for the affair gradually as I earn money, so please wait. Rachel said this while she was apologizing. However, I declined to accept compensation from her. I heard that Rachel hasn't had a stable job since leaving the nightclub. Initially, she managed with her savings, but because she couldn't shake off her spendthrift habits from her nightclub days, it seems she's now run out of money. That's why she had clung to Matt, who had money, trying to get back together by any means. But I know this might sound like an excuse. The truth is, I really did love Matt. When Rachel said she had always loved Matt, her eyes were earnest. That's why I decided to handle things with her amicably. On the other hand, Matt, having lost his job and with compensation payments due to me and Rachel, was in a financial crisis. So, he was evicted from his apartment because he couldn't pay the rent. Then, he came to me with a look of desperation. Kim, really? I was wrong. Please forgive me just this time. From now on, I'll do anything you say, just let me stay here. Ah, and of course, I'm not asking for money, just let me stay. Matt said this in a pathetic voice. Then I casually responded. Sure, you can stay here as long as you like. Really? Ah, what a relief. So I let Matt into the house for now. However, that night, while Matt was sleeping, I packed my belongings. I had been looking for a new place to move and had just finalized the arrangements the other day. By dawn, when Matt woke up, the moving truck had already arrived. Hey. What's going on? Why are you packing up so much? Where are you going? Ah, I was planning to move out today. You know this house is rented, right? So from now on, you'll need to pay the rent yourself. It's $1,000 a month. What? I can't pay that right now. You tricked me. I didn't trick you at all. I just said you could stay here as long as you like. So, good luck paying the rent. Bye-bye. I left the house after saying this. Since then, I have cancelled my phone contract and made it impossible for Matt to contact me ever again. Of course, I haven't told him my new address either. Sometime later, I happened to meet the landlord of the house where Matt and I used to live. When I asked about Matt, it seems he left because he couldn't pay the rent. No one knows where he went. Well, I'm leaving Matt to his own devices and am now living luxuriously in my dream high-rise apartment. The view from the window overlooks the cityscape. It truly is the best location. As for my health, I've completely recovered from all the stress now that I'm away from Matt. There's a fitness room on the first floor of the high-rise apartment, so I plan to exercise daily. Also, since the apartment allows pets, I quickly started keeping a Pomeranian, which I love. This female Pomeranian, Mocha, is now my precious family. However, even though I won $5 million in the lottery, I can't just play around. Since I've always liked working, I decided to get rehired at the company where I worked before marriage. Coincidentally, on the day I moved, I saw a mid-career recruitment ad on a job site. When I inquired, it turns out they had trouble finding good personnel after I left. So when I asked to be rehired, the person in charge was pleased. Now I am used to a comfortable living space and a familiar work environment. I've truly achieved the ideal lifestyle. Although I wasn't blessed with a happy marriage, from now on, I intend to enjoy living life my way. That's the greatest happiness for me now.